Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Kakashi trains Naruto to becomes like Anbu part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. Kakashi was perched on the roof of a building, scanning the village streets below. His body blending into the shadows cast by the fading light of dusk. Konoha's streets were quiet, but his senses told him something was off. There was a weird presence down there, fast and silent, moving through the streets. Kakashi narrowed his eye, trying to catch another glimpse. There, a quick flash of movement, darting between buildings. Moving with grace and evading all the passerbys swiftly, like a cat. Curiosity piqued, Kakashi moved across the rooftop, following the figure from above, staying hidden. The figure, small and light, moved with the kind of grace you'd expect from an animal, slipping through the narrow spaces between buildings with fluid grace. Whoever it was, they were quick, and their steps made barely any sound. Too quiet. Not normal for a villager. Maybe she was a secret ninja cat? Kakashi thought. He stayed on the rooftops, trailing them silently from above, his curiosity growing. As they reached a narrow alley, the figure came to an abrupt halt, their whole body tensing like they'd caught a scent or heard something unusual. They know I'm here, Kakashi realized. He stayed still, waiting to see what she'd do. The figure scanned the area, turning around to look at the spot where he had been a moment ago, only to find it empty. Clearly surprising the presence by his sudden absence, Kakashi made his move. He dropped down silently in front of her. The figure whipped around, not expecting the quick movement, and before either of them could react, smack, she crashed right into him. Kakashi barely felt the impact, but the girl stumbled back and landed on her, but with a soft thud. She blinked up at him, wide-eyed and completely stunned, her breath caught in her throat. Her green eyes were as wide as the full moon, and practically glowing in the fading light. For a second, she just sat there, frozen, staring at him in shock. Kakashi blinked too. Okay, not a cat. Definitely a girl. But what really caught him off guard wasn't the fact that she was a girl. It was how cute she was. Up close, her light brown hair was messy, falling around her face in soft, wild strands, and her wide big green eyes looked up at him with a mix of confusion and something else, curiosity. Like a small, startled forest creature, a fawn maybe, or one of those tiny rabbits that didn't know whether to run or freeze. The girl didn't move, sitting on the ground and staring at him, her mouth slightly open in surprise. She looked like she was ready to bolt at any second, but curiosity was keeping her in place. And then she made a sound. A low, soft noise, almost like purring. Kakashi's brain scrambled for an explanation. Purring? Humans don't purr. Except his Niken did. The dogs purred sometimes, a sign of trust or calm. He just stood there, blinking, completely baffled. Am I hearing this right? The girl kept staring at him, her eyes still wide, as if waiting for him to respond. When he didn't, she let out the sound again, louder this time, like she was asking, "Do you get it?" Kakashi crouched down slowly, bringing himself to her level. He tilted his head, still unsure of what was going on. Then, without thinking too much about it, he did what his Niken had taught him. He let out a small, hesitant purr, except his purr was not great. It wasn't as natural or animal-like as hers. He had definitely not used it on another human before. The girl's eyes went impossibly wide. She blinked at him in pure shock, like she couldn't believe he had just done that. As if I'm the weird one, Kakashi thought. Her posture shifted slightly, less tense but still wary, like she was debating whether he was a strange new creature or someone she could trust. She seemed frozen, staring at him like he had never seen a boy before. Her body relaxed just a little, the tension easing from her shoulders, but she was still wary, like she wasn't quite sure what to make of him. Kakashi, for his part, was still trying to process what had just happened. Am I seriously purring at this girl who just fell on her butt in an alley? Slowly, the girl pushed herself up off the ground, her movements still cautious but more curious now. She dusted herself off, her clothes, simple village-issued ones, looking out of place on her. They didn't quite fit, like they had been given to her without much thought. She was still watching him carefully, her head tilting slightly in curiosity. Kakashi stayed where he was, still crouched, still watching her, and just as confused as before. His Niken had taught him how to approach wild animals, to stay calm, no sudden movements, and to let them come to you. So, he stayed still, his eye carefully following her every move. The girl hesitated again, her fingers twitching slightly before she reached out toward him, her hand hovering near his wrist. She didn't touch him right away, just let her fingers hover there for a moment. Then, she lightly brushed her fingers against his wrist. Kakashi blinked but didn't pull away. He waited, still crouched, his brain trying to keep up with whatever bizarre situation he had found himself in. What is my life right now? When Kakashi didn't move or pull away, she grabbed his wrist more firmly, her grip light but insistent. Kakashi blinked. Without a word, the girl gave his wrist a small tug. Kakashi, caught off guard, stumbled slightly as she pulled him forward. Wait, am I being led away by a purring girl? Is this kidnapping? She started walking quickly, pulling him along with her. Kakashi, still processing everything, followed without resistance. What the hell is happening? She kept glancing back at him every few steps, as if checking to see if he was still there, her eyes sharp and focused, like she expected him to disappear. They moved through the alleyways, twisting and turning as the girl led him deeper into the quieter parts of the village. Kakashi, for his part, was just trying to keep up with whatever strange situation he had found himself in, and why is she not winded at all? For her part, she wasn't running in panic anymore. She was just running. Suddenly she let go of his wrist and let out a small, playful purr, her eyes flashing with something that almost seemed like excitement. Is she trying to play? Then she sped off. Kakashi found himself following her blindly, barely thinking, just keeping up. Okay, so we're running now. Together, I think, thought Kakashi. She turned corners sharply, but with a playful bounce in her step, her movements quick and unpredictable, seeing if he'd trip or falter. Every twist and turn felt like a challenge, as if she was teasing him. Can you keep up? Finally, after a few more turns, the girl slowed down and stopped. She let go of his wrist and took a few steps back, her eyes still on him, watching his every move. She wasn't nervous anymore, but there was still a hint of uncertainty in her playful stare, like she was waiting for him to do something. Kakashi scratched the back of his head awkwardly, his confusion reaching new levels. What just happened? He blinked at her, trying to make sense of the whole thing. The girl tilted her head again, letting out another soft purr, but this time it was almost like a tease, as if she was waiting for his next move. What are you? He muttered under his breath, more to himself than to her. The girl didn't answer. Instead, she tilted her head again, letting out one last soft purr. What is with the purring? Kakashi thought, his mind racing to catch up with his body. Humans don't purr, he reminded himself again, even though she clearly just did. Kakashi stared at her, his mind spinning, when the girl took a step back and tilted her head at him again. Her eyes were still playful, as if daring him to make a move. But when he didn't react, she let out a soft huff, almost like she was disappointed. And then, just like that, she turned and started running again. And then, just like that, she turned and started running again. Wait, hey! Kakashi called out, but his feet moved before his mind could catch up. What am I even doing? He shot after her, his body moving automatically as he followed her through the winding streets. She was fast. Not like a ninja, with precise, controlled movements, but more like something wild, unpredictable. She used the buildings like playground equipment, turning corners with unnecessary flips, and bounding off random walls. Is she parkouring? Her bare feet barely made a sound on the cobblestone streets, and every time Kakashi thought he was gaining on her, she darted around another corner or slipped through an impossibly narrow gap between buildings. This is harder than catching Tora, that demon cat. Kakashi vaulted over a low wall, feeling pretty good about himself, until his foot caught on a loose tile. He stumbled, arms flailing to keep balance. He managed to recover, but not before his knee nearly kissed the pavement. He scowled under his mask, mentally cursing the stupid tile and the fact that he almost face-planted. She glanced back at him over her shoulder, her wide green eyes flashing with playful mischief. As if she saw his near fall, she let out a quick, breathy sound, a kind of short, playful purr, and then picked up her pace, practically bouncing as she darted around another sharp corner. Oh, now she's playing me. Kakashi huffed in exasperation, swerving to avoid a stack of crates that suddenly materialized in his path. Why am I doing this? He pushed himself faster, determined to catch up as she darted ahead, her pace quickening as if sensing his approach. He was closing the gap, ducking under a laundry line like it was some sort of ninja test, when she glanced back again. Her eyes went comically wide upon realizing how close he had gotten. She let out a startled leap, completely ungraceful, and shot off like she'd just seen a ghost. Her feet barely seemed to touch the ground as she kicked into an even higher gear. This doesn't feel like a pursuit. Is this tag? Kakashi, not about to be outdone, sped up too, dodging past yet another obstacle. Was that a stray chicken? His mind reeled as he tried to process what was happening. I can't catch her. How is she so fast? They finally reached the outskirts of the village, where the buildings started to thin out and the streets became quieter. The girl slowed down, her playful energy still there, but something in her posture had shifted. She wasn't trying to outrun him anymore. Kakashi kept his pace steady, not wanting to scare her off again. When he caught up to her, she was standing at the edge of a small clearing, just beyond the last row of houses. Her eyes were still fixed on him, but there was something different in her gaze now, something quieter, almost thoughtful. Great. First we play tag, and now I'm being judged by a purring girl. They stood there in silence for a long moment, the sounds of the village behind them fading into the distance. Kakashi didn't know what to say, he wasn't even sure what he was supposed to be thinking anymore. What now? The girl took a step forward, her movements slow and deliberate, like she was testing the ground beneath her feet. Then she let out another soft purr, this one different. It wasn't playful anymore. It was almost calming. Kakashi blinked, taken aback. Wait. Why does that sound comforting? She moved a little closer, just a few feet away from him now, her eyes never leaving his. Kakashi stayed still, not wanting to startle her. He could see it now, up close, the girl really did move like an animal. But there was something else in her gaze, something deeper, like she was trying to understand him just as much as he was trying to figure her out. They stood there for a long time, either of them speaking, the only sound between them being the distant hum of the village and the soft rustling of leaves in the evening breeze. Finally, Kakashi broke the silence. What do you want? He asked quietly, not expecting an answer but hoping for something. The girl blinked at him, her green eyes searching his face for a moment. She tilted her head again, considering him, and then, to his surprise, she took another small step forward. Her hand, small and delicate, reached out toward him, fingers hovering near his mask. She didn't touch him, but her fingers stayed just inches from his face, as if she was trying to figure something out. Kakashi's breath itched slightly. Is she? Before he could react, she pulled her hand back, thankfully. Instead, she let out a soft, tentative hum, less of a purr, more of an apology. Her green eyes locked onto his, as if waiting for a response, for some sign that she hadn't crossed a line. Kakashi remained still, watching as she took a small step back, her eyes never leaving his. He realized then that she had wanted to remove his mask, but she had stopped herself when she noticed how his body tensed, how his shoulders stiffened ever so slightly. Smart, he thought, a flicker of respect forming in his mind. He stood there, feeling a little self-conscious for the first time in a while. My mask? He had worn it for so long, it never even crossed his mind that it might seem odd to someone. But now, with the way she stared at it, as if it was the strangest thing in the world, he felt oddly exposed. The girl stood taller, tilting her head, studying him in that same strange, animal-like way. Then, she made a sound, a soft, hesitant hum. It wasn't quite a purr, more like a gentle, testing noise, like she was experimenting. A new sound? Is she testing me? Kakashi blinked, trying to figure out what she was doing. When the hum didn't seem to have the desired effect, her brow furrowed slightly, and she shifted tactics. She made a new sound, this time a low growl, then a soft whistle, followed by a chirp. Each sound was so perfectly mimicked that Kakashi had to blink twice. Is she making animal noises at me? Her sounds and movements seemed purposeful. The girl huffed softly, her lips pressing into a tiny pout of frustration as if to say, ugh, this guy's broken. Clearly, she wasn't getting through to him the way she had hoped. But she wasn't giving up. She glanced at his face again, her eyes locking onto his mask for a brief moment, but this time she didn't reach for it. Instead, her gaze dropped down to his hand. She glanced at his fingers, then back at his eyes, as if asking for something. Kakashi tilted his head slightly, confused. She wasn't using words, maybe she didn't know any. Slowly, with more confidence now, she raised her own hand and lightly tapped his fingers. Kakashi's breath caught slightly, but he didn't move. She wasn't tugging him to follow like she had before. Instead, she placed his hand palm up between them, her fingers brushing against his. Kakashi blinked, his brain scrambling to catch up. Am I supposed to do something? Is this a secret handshake? She didn't wait for him to react. Her fingers moved softly over the lines of his palm, tracing them with delicate, almost curious precision. It was strange, strangely peaceful, and for the first time, Kakashi didn't feel like he was supposed to do anything. She wasn't threatening him, wasn't trying to pull him into another chase. She was studying him, trying to figure him out through touch, through instinct. Kakashi stayed still, letting her explore the interaction in her own way. Her fingers were light and deliberate, moving with a calmness that seemed completely at odds with how fast she had been moving earlier. She's so gentle. The girl let out another soft hum. He could feel the tension in his shoulders slowly easing. There was something almost comforting about the simplicity of it. No expectations. No words. Just quiet curiosity. The girl tilted her head slightly, her eyes flicking up to his for a brief moment, as if waiting for approval. What is this sudden desire to pat her on the head? He didn't know what she wanted from him. All of this, her sounds, her touches, it was so unfamiliar. He had no idea what was happening, but it wasn't bad. Just weird. Kakashi watched the girl continue her strange, delicate exploration of his hand. Her touches were so deliberate, and now she was mixing them with specific sounds. He had spent years on missions, reading between the lines, deciphering body language, and picking up on the smallest of clues. It hit him suddenly, maybe this wasn't just some random gesture or odd behavior. His mind flashed back to the sounds she'd made earlier, the hums, the purrs, the animal-like noises. They hadn't been random either. They were too precise, too practiced. It wasn't like she was incapable of words, it seemed more like words were foreign to her. She was using what she knew, sounds and touch. She is trying to communicate. She is trying to communicate. Kakashi's visible eye narrowed in thought. He knew his Niken communicated through subtle cues, body language, and simple gestures. The girl wasn't so different in that regard, except she was human. She's trying to make herself understood without words. He realized. She doesn't know how else to talk to me. The determination in her eyes was clear as she shifted her approach once more. This time, she started using her hands differently. Her movements were cautious, as though she expected him to understand what she was trying to say. It wasn't the formal ninja language of hand signs, it was something more instinctive. Okay, first tag, now charades. Kakashi had been trained to deal with all kinds of situations, but this? A girl making animal noises, testing him with weird gestures and purring? I've faced S-rank criminals with less confusion, he thought. She pointed to the ground, then to the sky, her fingers moving slowly and deliberately. She gestured to herself, then to him, made a small circle on her open palm, and followed it up with a running motion. Is she asking me to race? He was just about to nod, thinking he'd take her up on the challenge, when she repeated the hand movements again, this time with more focus. Kakashi tilted his head, still unsure of what she meant. But when she let out a soft hum, tilting her head as if to ask, "Did you get that?" something clicked. Oh. Not racing. She circled her palm again, looking at him with even more intensity. Together. Cautiously curious, Kakashi nodded and gently reached for her wrist, imitating the way she had touched him earlier. His fingers brushed against her skin, and when she didn't pull away, he tugged her into a slow jog. They moved together across the clearing, not fast, more like exploring? Yeah, exploring sounded right. He turned his head to look at her, raising an eyebrow in question. Is this what you wanted? The girl's response hit him like a bolt of lightning. Her face lit up in a wide, beaming smile. It was like someone had turned on the sun in the middle of the night. The uncertainty vanished from her eyes, replaced by pure, unfiltered excitement. She let out a delighted, breathy sound, something between a laugh and a hum, and immediately picked up her pace to match his, her bare feet moving effortlessly against the ground. Kakashi blinked, struggling to process the sheer amount of enthusiasm radiating from her. Is this what real happiness looks like? They slowed down as they reached the other side of the clearing, near the forest's edge. The girl came to a stop and turned her attention to the trees, her expression softening. She gestured toward the forest beyond the village walls, her hand sweeping toward the distant trees. A low, calming hum escaped her lips as she pointed to herself, signaling that the forest was where she was safe. Kakashi tilted his head. The forest? He pointed to her, then the forest, mimicking her hum. You live there? She nodded eagerly, her smile brightening as she placed her hands flat on the ground and slowly raised them to the sky, as if signaling peace or safety. She let out another safe hum. Kakashi scratched the back of his head, feeling a strange sense of calm wash over him. He repeated her gesture, mimicking the way she had pointed to the forest and made that peaceful sound. So that's where she feels at home. The girl's smile grew even wider, her expression glowing with happiness that he had understood. But then her face shifted, becoming more thoughtful. She pointed to herself again, then to the forest, her eyes turning back to him with a questioning look. Kakashi blinked. Is she asking me to go with her? She made the same small circle on her palm, her eyes full of hope and curiosity. Kakashi's eyes widened. She is asking me to go with her. He paused, glancing back toward the village behind them. He wasn't sure what to say, but the answer came naturally. He pointed to himself, then toward the rooftops in the distance. Mimicking her gestures, he placed his hand on the floor, raising them to the sky and made the same calm, peaceful hum. My home is back there, Kakashi said softly. Nice, I'm also a genius at charades. The change in the girl's expression was immediate. Her bright smile melted away, replaced by a deep, profound sadness that Kakashi hadn't expected. Her wide eyes dimmed, and her lips trembled slightly as she glanced from him to the forest, then back again. Her shoulders sagged, and she looked as though she might burst into tears at any moment. Her lips curved downward into a sad, almost heartbroken frown. The quick change caught Kakashi completely off guard. Whoa, wait, what? Kakashi's mind scrambled, trying to understand the sudden wave of pure, unfiltered sorrow she was radiating. Is this what real sadness looks like? The intensity of her expression hit him harder than he expected. It wasn't just any sadness, it was the kind of sorrow that seemed to wrap itself around her entire posture, making her shoulders sag and her eyes glisten. It touched something deep in him as another image reminded him of something familiar. She looks just like Shiba when he doesn't get his treats. An idea sparked in Kakashi's mind. Maybe Shiba could help. Quickly, Kakashi brought his hands together, forming the summoning seal. In a puff of smoke, a small figure appeared at his feet. Yo, Kakashi! What's the— Shiba stopped mid-sentence, his lively eyes catching sight of the girl immediately. His tail wagged once, but then paused, his nose twitching as he sniffed the air. Hey, who's this? Kakashi crouched down next to Shiba, his voice low. Shiba, I need your help. I think you might understand her better than I do. Shiba tilted his head, his sharp ears flicking toward the girl. Huh. She smells like the forest. The girl, who had been watching Shiba with wide, fascinated eyes, slowly crouched down to his level. The sadness on her face wasn't completely gone, but her curiosity was starting to peek through. Progress. Shiba, with his naturally friendly and lively nature, didn't hesitate for long. He padded over to her and nuzzled his head against her hand. The girl's eyes lit up, and she let out a soft, tentative hum. The corners of her mouth lifted ever so slightly into a faint smile, the sadness not completely gone, but now mingled with something warmer— hope. Shiba barked happily. She made a few more soft noises, and Shiba's tail wagged in response. The girl, gaining confidence, gently petted Shiba's head, her movements more assured now. She made a few more of her soft noises, her gaze locked on Shiba as if he was the most fascinating thing she'd ever encountered. Shiba's ears perked up, and his tail wagged even harder, his enthusiasm contagious as he barked again. Kakashi watched the interaction closely, feeling his eyebrow twitch. That actually worked? Kakashi watched the interaction between the girl and Shiba closely, feeling his eyebrow twitch. That actually worked? Kakashi leaned in, his eye narrowing in curiosity. What is she saying? Shiba's nose twitched thoughtfully. She says the forest is her home, and she doesn't get how you live in such a smelly place. Oh, and she's curious about you. Kakashi's eyebrows shot up. Curious about me? He watched as the girl gave Shiba a particularly good ear scratch, like she was reading from a manual titled How to Charm a Dog in 10 Seconds. Shiba, the traitor, was clearly loving it. His tail wagged even harder, if that was possible, as the girl giggled softly. Seriously? I have never gotten this response. Shiba barked again, clearly enjoying this a little too much. Yep, curious about you. But she thinks I'm easier to understand. Kakashi felt his other eyebrow twitch. Easier to understand? Was Shiba mocking him? His gaze darted back to the girl, who was now giggling softly. Shiba nudged her hand playfully with his head, and she made another small, gentle noise, like they were having the best conversation in the world. She's really trying to understand you, boss, Shiba said, sounding both impressed and curious. She has never actually communicated with someone so similar to her. He turned his head slightly, as if asking a question with his tone. Kakashi sighed quietly. So similar? Does she mean another human? His gaze softened as he saw the now gentle look on her face. She feels more at ease with Shiba. Shiba glanced up at him with a smirk, or as much of a smirk as a dog could manage, and then back at the girl, who was now sitting cross-legged on the ground, fully engrossed in her new friend. Am I jealous of my Niken? Kakashi scratched the back of his head, feeling a wave of awkwardness wash over him. Right, Kakashi muttered to himself, trying to pull himself together. He pointed toward the village, then at himself, repeating the earlier hand signs she had used for home. Home. Village. The girl momentarily pulled her attention away from Shiba, followed his gestures. At least she's still listening to me. Her lips pressed together in a small frown, thoughtful, as she glanced between Kakashi and Shiba. Slowly, she raised her hands and gestured toward the village again, her movements more deliberate this time, her eyes flicking back and forth between the two of them. The earlier excitement had faded, replaced by a quiet determination. She repeated the same motion for home, her gaze steady. Kakashi's eyebrow lifted, watching her closely. What is she? She's trying to say something, Shiba murmured, his nose twitching. Then, to his utter surprise, she opened her mouth. The sound that came out wasn't like her usual hums or purrs, it was quiet and raspy, almost like she hadn't used her voice in years. I.e., she struggled 3. Kakashi's eye practically doubled in size. Did she just say home? His visible eye widened, and for a split second, he forgot how to breathe, trying to wrap his mind around the sound. It was strained, but it was a word. A real word. Shiba's tail wagged, clearly impressed. Not bad, kid. Encouraged by their reactions, the girl smiled, a small, shy smile, and repeated, H home, a little clearer this time, pointing to him. Kakashi crouched down lower, his heart doing that weird fluttery thing that was both confusing and endearing at the same time. Yeah, he said softly, nodding in encouragement. Home. Ai. He pointed to the village again. Village. Sado. Her eyes flickered with recognition. Satu, she repeated softer this time. Her voice still scratchy like a kitten's first meow. Kakashi's heart might have melted a little. Okay, this is actually kind of adorable. Feeling the moment, Kakashi gave her a thumbs up, but her reaction was not what he expected. She stared at him with that same bewildered look she had earlier, like he just pulled a rabbit out of his ear. Oh right, she's never seen a thumbs up. Lowering his hand quickly, he coughed awkwardly into his fist. Moving on. The girl pointed at him again, her voice still rough around the edges. Home. Village, she whispered. Shiba, wagging his tail happily, nudged the girl with his nose. She's learning fast, huh? He barked in approval. Kakashi felt a weird mix of pride and shock bubbling up inside him. He scratched his head awkwardly, feeling a bit like an overenthusiastic teacher. She was talking. Well, sort of. But then she pointed toward herself again and gestured to the forest, her brow furrowing. Her lips moved, but the word she wanted wouldn't come. Her eyes darted back to Kakashi, filled with that unmistakable look of, what's that word? Kakashi blinked, realizing she wanted to know the name of the forest. He felt a little embarrassed, unsure why teaching her basic words like a parent to a child felt so strange. A purring sound disturbed his thoughts. She was practically purring in excitement, eager to learn. Okay, focus. Be a teacher. He cleared his throat, pointing toward the trees. Forest. Mori, he said clearly, then repeated it again, slower this time. Emori. The girl's eyes lit up. She pressed her lips together, furrowing her brow in concentration. Memoji? Kakashi chuckled softly. Not bad. Close, but not quite. He gave her a small nod, his voice gentle. Emori, he repeated, pointing again, making sure to really emphasize it. Her face brightened even more, a strange mix of triumph and excitement. Mori, she managed, her voice still raspy but filled with the kind of pride only a child feels when they've finally gotten something right. She looked at Kakashi, her wide eyes practically begging for approval. Kakashi smiled under his mask. That's right. Forest. The girl beamed, practically bouncing on her toes as she repeated the words over and over again. Home. Forest. Shiba, who had been watching the whole interaction with his head tilted in amusement, barked happily, wagging his tail. She's like a little puppy learning how to bark for the first time, he quipped. Kakashi couldn't help but laugh, scratching the back of his head awkwardly. Is this how people feel teaching? He glanced down at Shiba. I've never had to teach someone to speak before. Shiba barked again. Well, you're doing great, boss. And look, she's not sad anymore. It was true. The girl's earlier gloom had all but evaporated, replaced by an infectious, childlike joy as she repeated her new words like treasures. But as Kakashi watched her, something else tugged at his senses, a shift in the air. His body tensed, instincts flaring. Something's coming. He straightened slightly, his eye narrowing. It was subtle, barely noticeable, but there were others nearby, closing in fast. Anbu. The sun had finally dipped below the horizon, leaving the world cloaked in darkness. The only light came from the faint glow of the village's lanterns in the distance, casting long, eerie shadows across the clearing. The girl, still in her world of Mori and Ai, didn't notice the fast-approaching presences. The girl, sharp in her own way, picked up on his sudden change. Her chant stopped mid-word. Green eyes wide with confusion, she glanced up at him, her entire body coiling in a familiar tension. Before Kakashi could say a word, she darted behind him, peeking out from his side. Her playful energy had completely evaporated, replaced by something primal, fear. Her slightly crouched posture, though she's not hiding, she's preparing to run. Kakashi realized. Kakashi stayed perfectly still as two masked figures emerged from the shadows, their steps soundless but deliberate. The first one wore a fox mask, his presence commanding. The second, with the tiger mask, hung back slightly, his stance more rigid, colder. Hataki, Fox Sen's voice was measured, but it cut through the tension. She's coming with us. Kakashi felt the girl clutch his shirt from behind at the detached tone, and Kakashi heard a soft, almost inaudible hum escaping her. He glanced back at the girl, but she was trembling, her whole posture wound tight. She's terrified. Fox Sen's tone sharpened. She's dangerous. We've been ordered to return her to T. T? Kakashi blinked in surprise. She was already in custody? Kakashi's mind spun. His gaze flicked to the girl. The girl, this wild, frightened creature, had somehow escaped the highly secure interrogation unit. How in the world did she manage that? He glanced at her again, as if trying to reconcile this new information with the gentle, purring creature he had been teaching words just moments ago. She's been avoiding containment and not cooperating. She's a threat to the village. You know the drill, continued Fox Sen, taking a step forward. Threat? The girl's soft, anxious purr started again, barely audible. Kakashi shifted slightly, placing himself firmly between her and the Anbu, not letting them see her. They don't understand her at all. Without hesitation, Shiba padded forward, placing himself protectively in front of the girl, a low growl rumbling from his throat as he glared at the Anbu. Shiba, stand down, warned Kakashi before the situation could escalate. Shiba shot him a disgruntled look but obeyed, though his ears remained pinned back in irritation. She doesn't understand what's going on, Kakashi said, his voice low but steady. She doesn't know how to talk. Orders are orders, Tiger stepped forward, his voice as cold as the night air. You're Anbu now, Hataki. You know the protocol. Step aside. Kakashi's pulse quickened, and before he could form a response, his senses flared. Behind. A third figure, Hawk Mask, had silently approached from behind. The girl, still clutching his shirt, didn't see him coming. Hawk's hand shot out, reaching to restrain her. No! Kakashi reacted instinctively, spinning around in a flash. His sharp movement yanked the girl off balance. She gasped as her fingers slipped from his shirt, and she tumbled to the ground with a soft thud. Just as Hawk's hand reached for her, Kakashi intercepted it, gripping his wrist with lightning speed. Perfect way of not escalating the situation, Kakashi. Hawk-sen froze, Kakashi's grip holding him in place. The tension between them crackled like lightning. Don't touch her, Kakashi growled, his voice low, protective. The two Anbu behind him tensed, clearly not expecting Kakashi to stop the move so quickly. The girl sat on the ground, dazed, her eyes wide with surprise. Her eyes darted between Kakashi and the Anbu. But it wasn't long before fear took over. Her breathing quickened and her hands trembled as she tried to push herself up, but she was dazed, overwhelmed. Damn it! Kakashi shot a look at Hawk Mask. She's panicking. Hawk Mask's head tilted slightly, the cold glint of his mask unreadable. His voice cut through the stillness. Hataki, you're out of line? Fox and Tiger had moved closer, their postures tense and ready to act. Kakashi's grip tightened slightly, his pulse hammering. You don't understand. She's not a threat. She's scared, not resisting. Kakashi replied coolly, keeping his body between the girl and Hawk. Hawk Mask yanked his hand back, eyes narrowing behind his mask. You think you can protect her? I'm not trying to fight you, Kakashi said, his voice low. I just want to help her. You know as well as I do that grabbing her like that would have sent her into a frenzy. The girl let out a soft, desperate whine. Kakashi crouched down in front of the girl, placing himself between her and the Anbu. She was still on the ground, her breath shaky, her eyes wide and frightened. He needed to calm her down, fast. Hey, his voice softened. She responded by shuffling away from him, keeping her frantic eyes on him. Right, wait for them to come to you. But he didn't have that much time with the Anbu present. Kakashi's mind raced. She needed something more. Something deeper. Kakashi's thoughts flashed back to his first encounter with Pakken. The little dog had purred, a soft, calming sound, letting him know he was safe, that Pakken was there to protect him. It worked on me when I was scared, maybe it'll work on her too. Kakashi took a breath and crouching lower, he let out a small, hesitant purr. It wasn't as natural as hers, and certainly not as smooth as Pakken's, but the sound was meant to be reassuring. The girl blinked, her eyes locking onto him as the purr filled the quiet. Behind him, The Anbu exchanged bewildered looks, clearly thrown off by what they had just witnessed. Did he just purr? At her? Fox muttered under his breath, clearly thrown off by Kakashi's unorthodox method, but his rigid stance softened slightly. Hawk's eyes flicked to Kakashi, the disbelief palpable. Kakashi, suddenly aware of how ridiculous the situation must have looked, felt heat creeping up his neck but ignored it. Okay, yeah, maybe purring in front of your ANBU comrades isn't the coolest move. But there wasn't time to dwell on it. He let the sound resonate in his throat, hoping it would reach her through her panic. The girl blinked up at him, her trembling easing slightly at the sound. Slowly, she let out a soft, shaky purr in response, though still frightened, but her trembling began to subside. Hawk retreated a few steps, the tension in his posture still present but less aggressive. Hawk watched, visibly taken aback by the girl's calmer state, and finally retreated a few steps, the tension in his posture still present but less aggressive. She's purring back? He murmured. Sheba padded over to the girl, giving her a soft nudge with his nose, as if to reassure her further. The girl let out another soft purr, calmer this time, but still cautious. Fox watched the exchange, then turned to Kakashi. Explain yourself, Hataki. She's scared, she doesn't understand, Kakashi said, turning back to the Anbu, his voice soft to not scare the girl. She's been living with animals, not people. She doesn't know how to respond to your commands. Let me translate, I can help. His gaze communicated a silent plea for cooperation. Fox Mask hesitated, clearly weighing his options. Then, after a long pause, he spoke. Fine. But she's your responsibility. If she bolts, it's on you. Tiger Mask's eyes narrowed behind his mask, his posture stiff. He clearly didn't like the decision. Kakashi gave a small, almost invisible sigh of relief. Understood, he nodded. Sheba wagged his tail, barking softly. Wow, boss, you stopped Anbu by purring? Impressive. Kakashi shot Sheba a look, his eye narrowing in mild embarrassment. Yeah, let's hope this doesn't become a regular thing. He swallowed his discomfort, glancing at the masked figures still watching closely. He could feel their confused stares on him, and the awkward heat crept up his neck. He stood up and offered a hand to the girl, who had managed to push herself up but was still looking around anxiously. She hesitated, her eyes darting between Kakashi and the Anbu. After a moment, she slowly placed her small hand in his. She's trusting me. Kakashi gently helped her stand, her fingers still trembling slightly. The girl stayed close to Kakashi's side, her earlier panic now just a faint tremor in her hands. Her wide eyes flicked between him and the masked Anbu, distrust and caution still evident in her posture. Kakashi moved his hands, using the simple signs they'd developed earlier. Me. You. Together. Safe. The girl's gaze focused on his hands. She hesitated, her body tensing slightly before a small, relieved hum escaped her. The tension began to ease from her body, though her eyes stayed alert, warily watching the Anbu. Good. She's calming down. The girl singled at him, at her, and then did the together sign. Kakashi gave her a reassuring nod. She glanced up at him, the flicker of trust growing, and took a deep breath. Her hands stopped trembling, and for a moment, it seemed like the worst of the panic had passed. But then, something unexpected happened. The girl turned to face the Anbu. Her small frame trembled ever so slightly, but her green eyes gleamed with determination. And then she purred at them. Kakashi blinked. Wait. What? The sound was louder this time, a clear, drawn-out purr, almost defiant, like a kitten trying to sound intimidating. The effect? Not quite what she'd expect. The Anbu stiffened, completely thrown off. Fox Mask's head tilted just slightly, as if trying to process what on earth was happening. Tiger Mask visibly faltered, taking half a step back as if he had no idea how to respond to being purred at. Their confusion was palpable. Even Kakashi couldn't believe what he was seeing. She's purring at them. He felt the urge to put a hand over his face, as the second-hand embarrassment hit him in waves. Oh no. For a long, agonizing moment, the clearing was filled with nothing but the strange, vibrating hum of the girl's purr, mingling awkwardly with the tension. Please stop, please stop. The girl, proud and oblivious, eventually stopped, only to tilt her head and give the Anbu a tiny, innocent smile. Kakashi's eyes darted between the girl and the Anbu. She thinks this went well, doesn't she? He was sure his ears were turning red under his mask. The girl, blissfully unaware of how utterly baffling the situation had become, let out one final purr, this one softer, more like a question. She tilted her head slightly, green eyes wide and expectant. Was she waiting for the Anbu to purr back? Kakashi felt the overwhelming urge to melt into the ground and disappear. No. No, no, no. Please don't purr back. The Anbu did not purr back. I think Kakashi internally cringed, his shoulders slumping as reality hit him like a brick. Maybe I'm not the best role model for normal human behavior. Besides the girl, Shiba's tail wagged furiously. Purring at Anbu? That's a new one, boss. I think she's winning. There was a beat of silence, and then, SNRK. From behind, Hawk let out a low, strangled noise, a sound that could only be described as a half scoff, half laugh. He had suddenly stiffened, his shoulders visibly shaking as he desperately tried to hold back a laugh. Kakashi flinched and shot a withering glare at Shiba, his face burning with embarrassment. Of all the ridiculous situations. She's communicating, Kakashi managed, his voice strained with the effort of holding his composure. This is normal for her. Somehow. Fox's mask blinked once, then twice, as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Probably questioning every life decision that led him here, Kakashi thought. Shifting his attention to Kakashi, Fox finally broke the silence. You think you can handle this? The girl, still looking proud of herself, let out a satisfied hum and gave another soft, final purr. Please stop purring at the Anbu. I really don't need this in my career report. Kakashi sighed, realizing this was somehow his life now. He cleared his throat, trying to regain some semblance of control over the situation. Look, she's... Kakashi's instincts flared, and before he could fully process, Tiger moved, his patience clearly snapping. His hand shot out, grabbing the girl's arm with a firm, unyielding grip. The response was immediate and visceral. The girl thrashed wildly, her body jerking like a cornered animal, her eyes wide with panic as a loud, sharp sound tore from her throat. It wasn't just a scream, it was more like the howl of a wounded creature, raw and wild, the kind of sound that cuts straight through the quiet night. He reacted on instinct, moving swiftly to intercept, but his hand only grazed the edge of her shirt as she was yanked away from him. The look she gave him in that moment, it cut deeper than any kunai. Her wide green eyes filled with disbelief and a deep hurt that made his chest tighten. The look she gave him was clear. You said you'd protect me. Tiger-san didn't flinch, his grip on the girl tightening as she continued to thrash. She's dangerous, he growled, voice cold and unyielding. This isn't normal behavior. The girl's struggles became more frantic, her small hands clawing at Tiger's arms and her animalistic cries rising in pitch. Her wide eyes locked on Kakashi, pleading, accusing, desperate. She thinks I've abandoned her. Fox Mask stepped forward, his posture tense, eyes narrowing beneath the mask. Tiger, that's enough. Before Fox could finish, Tiger's free hand darted to the base of the girl's neck with sharp precision, pressing down on a pressure point. Her body went rigid, a faint, whimper-like noise escaping her lips before she slumped. Tiger clearly had no intention of catching her, but Kakashi moved faster. He caught her just before she hit the ground, pulling her unconscious form into his arms to prevent her from sprawling on the dirt. Behind him, Hawk-san let out a soft grunt, his disapproval evident in the subtle shift of his posture. He wasn't pleased with Tiger's actions, but neither was he about to argue. This complicates things, he muttered under his breath. Shiba, ever the loyal Niken, chimed in with a growl. She was just trying to communicate. Kakashi didn't respond, his gaze fixed on the girl's unconscious form in his arms. The weight of her earlier gaze, her hurt and disbelief, still hung heavily over him. She trusted me and I let this happen. Shiba padded closer to Kakashi, his ears flat in displeasure. She was scared, not dangerous, the Niken said, his voice low and defensive. You don't treat scared animals like that. She was just trying to communicate. Tiger's gaze flicked down to Shiba, a hint of irritation flashing in his eyes, but he said nothing. Fox, however, let out a quiet sigh, rubbing the back of his neck as if trying to ease the strain of the situation. Hawk glanced at Fox. What's the plan? Fox Mask glanced between Kakashi and the girl before speaking. We'll bring her back. Hataki, you're coming with us. If you've figured out a way to communicate, you'll be useful during interrogation. Kakashi blinked, surprised by the offer. Still interrogation? He glanced down at the girl again, her expression peaceful now, a stark contrast to the wild panic from earlier. He gave a small nod, his voice steady as he replied. I'll stay with her. Tiger's eyes narrowed, his annoyance palpable, but he didn't argue. He simply stepped aside. Kakashi's visible eye narrowed as Hawk crouched in front of him, reaching out to take the unconscious girl. His grip on her instinctively tightened, his body curling slightly to shield her from the others. Not again. The thought surged through him like a wave, a sudden protectiveness he couldn't suppress. It wasn't just about the girl, it was about the past, the people he couldn't protect. Obito. Rin. His chest tightened as the memories flashed before him. I couldn't protect them. Kakashi's eye flicked to the girl, her face peaceful now, oblivious to the chaos around her. The sound of her earlier cry still echoed in his mind, the raw hurt in her wide green eyes stabbing at something deep inside him. She trusted me, and I let her down. Just like them. Hawk, still crouched in front of him, hesitated. He could see the unspoken emotions swirling behind Kakashi's mask, the protectiveness, the guilt, the defiance. The infamous Kakashi, the friend killer. It was obvious now that the name was completely wrong. Slowly, Hawk extended his hand, a rare softness in his tone. Hataki, Hawk said gently, I'll carry her. Kakashi's jaw clenched. His fingers flexed around the girl's small frame. Can I trust them? His rational side won out as he carefully passed her into Hawk's arms. The Anbu cradled her unconscious form with surprising gentleness, adjusting his hold to keep her secure. As soon as the transfer was made, Kakashi felt a hollow pang of unease settle in his stomach. I'll be watching you like a hawk, Hawk. Just as Kakashi stepped back, Tiger moved closer, his presence looming. Don't let personal feelings interfere with the mission, he muttered, his voice sharp with warning. A wild animal is most dangerous when it's cornered. Kakashi's gaze remained fixed ahead. She's not an animal, Kakashi shot back, his voice icy. Understanding her isn't interference, it's ensuring we handle this correctly. Tiger's posture remained rigid. Our duty is to secure potential risks to the village, he replied tersely. Fox, watching the exchange with narrowed eyes, intervened. That's enough, Tiger. We're not here to make this more complicated than it already is. Hawk, adjusting the girl in his arms, gave a quick nod of agreement. Then, in a completely out-of-character move, Hawk tilted his head, his mask hiding the mischievous smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. He let out a soft, exaggerated purr, a mocking attempt to mimic the strange communication that had passed between Kakashi and the girl earlier. It was absurd and awkward, catching everyone off guard, especially Kakashi. Kakashi blinked, utterly taken aback. Did he just? He stared at Hawk in disbelief, his mind scrambling to process the bizarre turn of events. Fox, clearly not expecting that, let out a quiet laugh, his lips twitching beneath his mask. Well, that's a new communication method, he remarked dryly. Perhaps we should all adopt it. Hawk gave a slight shrug. It seemed to help earlier, he said, his tone neutral but with a hint of amusement. Shiba wagged his tail, his eyes gleaming. Purring Anbu, now that's something I'd pay to see, he chimed in. Fox sighed dramatically. I'm going to have to write a report about this, aren't I? The boss purring should be the highlight, Shiba replied, his tone teasing. Kakashi didn't respond, still processing Hawk's ridiculous attempt at humor. Not exactly the best time to purr at me, Hawk. The absurdity of the situation, the purring, the serious Anbu trying to handle this feral girl, was almost too much for him. He wasn't amused, but the tension eased ever so slightly. Even so, Kakashi couldn't shake the uneasy feeling gnawing at him. Something isn't right. His mind raced with questions. Why was she in tea in the first place? How did they not notice she doesn't understand? There were too many gaps in the story, and Kakashi wasn't content to leave it at that. He gave a quick, discreet signal to Shiba, who immediately caught on. Without drawing attention to himself, the loyal Niken slipped away into the shadows, moving swiftly to find Minato. If something's off, the Hokage needs to know. Eventually, he let out a long sigh and scratched the back of his head again, his mind still muddled with confusion. Seriously, what just happened? With a nod from Fox, the group disappeared in a blur, using Shunshin to quickly travel to the tea building. With a nod from Fox, the group disappeared in a blur, using Shunshin to quickly travel to the tea building. They reappeared in front of the cold, foreboding facility in an instant, the transition smooth and silent. Kakashi landed lightly on his feet, just behind Fox and Hawk. As they entered the facility, the dim lighting cast long shadows across the steel walls, creating an eerie, suffocating atmosphere. I really hate this place. At the entrance, they were greeted by a man in standard tea uniform. His face was hard, etched with lines of impatience, but it wasn't his appearance that caught Kakashi's attention. No, it was the smell. The smell of fear, her fear. Kakashi's gaze narrowed beneath his mask as he instinctively stepped a little closer to the unconscious girl. This man, he was the one who had been interrogating her. The man barely spared them a glance as he gestured for them to follow. This way, please, he said curtly, his tone devoid of any warmth or sympathy. His gaze briefly darted to the girl, cold and detached, before he turned on his heel and led them down the dimly lit hall. The interrogator led them through a series of cold, sterile corridors until they reached a small, dimly lit room. The room was small, starkly lit, with the typical sparse setup for an interrogation, just a table, a few chairs, and nothing else. It was unnervingly clean, the sterile scent overpowering. The air inside felt heavy, stifling almost. Something is off. Kakashi frowned, his nose twitched. The room, it didn't smell like her. If she had truly been held here, there should have been some trace of her fear, her confusion, her scent. Nothing. No scent. Kakashi's brow furrowed beneath his mask. The girl, still unconscious, was placed in a chair by Hawk, who handled her with surprising gentleness. Her small frame seemed even more fragile under the harsh lights of the interrogation room. She stirred slightly, a soft hum escaping her lips, but she didn't wake. Kakashi moved closer to Hawk, lowering his voice so only the two of them could hear. "Something's off," he murmured. "This room doesn't smell like her at all." Hawk shot him a sideways glance and asked to the room, "This where she was before? Shouldn't we find a place with a cot?" The interrogator, stiff and unreadable, ignored Hawk's observation and gestured toward the door. "This is a restricted session. You'll need to leave now. The interrogation will resume without your assistance." As if. Kakashi took a step forward, his voice cold and unyielding. "I'm staying." The interrogator's face tightened with irritation, his gaze darkening as he glared at Kakashi. "This is a classified operation. Your presence isn't necessary, nor is it authorized." Before Kakashi could push further, Fox cut in smoothly, his tone as calm as ever. "After observing the detainee, it's clear she doesn't communicate through standard human language. That's why we brought Hataki. He's established communication with her." The interrogator's lips thinned into a hard, disapproving line. Clearly, he wasn't pleased with the Anbu's decision to involve Kakashi, but before he could retort, the door to the interrogation room slammed open with a resounding crack. The fourth Hokage stepped in the room, his steps measured and calm. His presence filled the room instantly. Minato's usual warmth and gentle demeanor were replaced by something far more serious. His sharp blue eyes scanned the room quickly, locking onto the girl slumped in the chair before they finally landed on the man who had been interrogating her. Shiba padded beside him, tail low but alert. Minato's expression remained calm, but Kakashi swore he saw something dangerous flicker in his sensei's eyes. He nodded at Kakashi, acknowledging him, but his attention quickly shifted to the man standing in the room. "Why was I not informed that a young girl was being interrogated in T?" His voice, though quiet, carried an undeniable authority. Kakashi's heart skipped a beat. He has no idea what is happening. Minato should have known everything happening in the village, especially something as sensitive as a young girl being interrogated by Anbu. The silence that followed was deafening. Hawk stiffened beside the girl, and Fox, ever the calm one, shifted uncomfortably. It was clear none of them had expected this question. How had Minato, of all people, been kept in the dark about this? But the real surprise was the interrogator. He showed no reaction at all, his calm facade eerily intact. Tiger, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke, his voice low and measured. "She was deemed a potential threat to the village. We brought her back after she escaped." Minato's gaze darkened as he turned to Tiger, his eyes cold. "Who gave the order to bring her here? I don't recall authorizing any such mission." Fox cleared his throat, trying to bridge the tension. "The report came through the proper channels," he said, though there was a trace of confusion in his tone. The interrogator, maintaining his composure, spoke in a detached voice. "The situation was handled internally. There was no need to involve." Minato raised a hand, cutting him off mid-sentence. He stepped closer to the man, his expression unreadable, but his presence commanding enough to make the interrogator take a small step back. "I want to know why I wasn't informed about this." Minato's voice was ice-cold, and for the first time, the interrogator's mask of calm faltered. "I was told she was suspected of questionable objectives. It was just a routine questioning," the man answered, fixing his detached mask. "Questionable objectives?" Minato's tone was cutting now, every word sharp enough to slice through the tension. "Who decided that?" All eyes in the room shifted toward the interrogator, who hesitated, unsure of what to say. It was clear now that whoever had orchestrated this had gone around the Hokage, and Minato wasn't going to let it slide. Minato's eyes flicked toward Kakashi, his expression softening slightly as he addressed his former student. "Kakashi." Kakashi straightened, meeting Minato's gaze. His expression shifted from the concern he had felt moments earlier to something more professional. Time to act like an Anbu again. Hokage-sama, Kakashi began, keeping his voice level. I encountered the girl around 1800 hours. She had apparently escaped from custody by then. Her communication isn't verbal like we're used to, she uses gestures, sounds, and animal-like cues, purring, for instance. He cringed inwardly, but there was no avoiding it. Minato raised an eyebrow, a glint of amusement momentarily breaking through his serious demeanor. Purring? Yes, Hokage-sama. Kakashi fought the urge to groan. This was not going the way he had hoped. I know how it sounds, but from what I observed, she's lived her entire life in the forest. The way she moves, the way she reacts to her surroundings, it's instinctive, almost like she's part of the wild. Minato's gaze softened as he looked at the girl, then back at Kakashi. And you've been able to communicate with her? Kakashi nodded. It's rough, but yes. I believe I was beginning to understand her, and she was starting to trust me. However, his eye flicked toward Tiger, a barely restrained glare burning beneath his calm exterior. After the ANBU's rough handling, that trust may now be broken. His voice dropped, barely masking his frustration. He paused for a moment, then continued, his tone professional once more as he faced Minato. From what I've observed, she's not hostile, Hokage-sama. She's afraid and doesn't understand what we expect from her. If we handle this on her terms, we can avoid further complications. Kakashi took a breath, steadying himself. As for her being held here, this room doesn't match her scent. She wasn't kept here. Something's off. The interrogator faltered for a moment, his posture stiffening. He cleared his throat, his eyes darting to Minato before returning to Kakashi. She evaded containment, escaped multiple times, and showed signs of hostility during her capture. Protocol demands we investigate further. Before anyone could respond, Minato's chakra flared, just for an instant, but it was enough to send a wave of pressure crashing through the room. Though controlled, the sheer force behind it unsettled everyone. Even Kakashi felt his pulse quicken. It was the girl, however, who reacted the most. The girl awoke with a start, her instincts firing. The moment Minato's chakra hit her senses, her eyes flew open, wide and wild, pupils dilating as she scrambled out of the chair with a panicked flail. Her hand shot out, desperately searching for stability, but in her frantic state, she only succeeded in knocking over the chair. She hit the ground with a thud, immediately retreating into the farthest corner of the room, her breath coming in sharp gasps. The girl's eyes darted around the room, every muscle in her body tense and ready to flee. But then her gaze landed on Minato, and she froze. Her breath hitched, the fear in her eyes growing more intense. She could feel it, the raw, overwhelming power radiating from him. Strong. Kakashi stepped forward, his voice soft, calm, trying to reach her. Hey, it's okay. You're safe. No one's going to hurt you. He made the same signs she understood, me, you, safe, but the girl barely registered him. She was hyper-focused on Minato. The girl was curled into herself, her small hands gripping the fabric of her shirt tightly as if holding on for dear life. Her body trembled with every breath, and a soft whimper escaped her lips. Minato, noticing the girl's reaction, didn't move at first. He kept his posture relaxed, non-threatening, his sharp blue eyes softening slightly. He understood now what Kakashi had meant, she was operating purely on instinct, and his presence wasn't helping. Slowly, he knelt down on one knee, lowering himself closer to her eye level, making himself smaller in her eyes. His movements were measured, deliberate, designed not to startle her. Easy, Minato said softly, his voice gentle after a whimper left her lips. He let his chakra settle, changing it into a more subtle, calming aura. The girl blinked, her rigid posture loosening slightly. Her wild eyes flickered with confusion as she continued to stare at Minato. His soft blue eyes met hers, and though he was the most powerful man in the room, there was no hint of dominance or danger in his gaze. Just gentle. The girl's trembling began to ease. Her eyes shifted, taking in the way everyone reacted to him. He was the leader here. Strong. Gentle. Alpha. Her gaze flicked between Minato and Kakashi. Slowly, tentatively, she began to crawl forward on her hands and knees, inching closer to Minato. Her movements were hesitant, like an animal approaching something unknown but drawn by a feeling of safety. Kakashi's heart twisted at the sight. She doesn't trust me anymore. The loss of trust hit him harder than he expected, but he didn't show it. It was like a knife twisting in his gut. She had looked to him for protection, for understanding, but now she saw him as part of the danger. He wanted to reach out to her, to tell her it was all a misunderstanding, but he knew that any move he made might just scare her further. Damn it. Minato didn't move as the girl inched closer, his calm gaze never leaving hers. He waited, giving her the space and time she needed to feel safe. His hands rested loosely on his knees, his posture open and non-threatening. She stopped just in front of him, hesitating for a long moment, her eyes flicking up to meet his, still cautious. Minato remained quiet, his blue eyes soft and patient. Slowly, the girl let out a soft, tentative sound, a purr, low and steady, a greeting. Her hand lifted, trembling slightly, as she reached out to gently touch Minato's knee. Of course she trusts Minato, Kakashi thought. His sensei had always been the kind of person people were naturally drawn to. He's always been the kind of person you can't help but trust. Minato didn't just protect people, he made them feel safe, seen, understood, and he didn't fail in protecting her. Hello there, Minato said, his voice barely above a whisper, as if trying not to spook her. He didn't make any sudden movements. Instead, he gave her a gentle, encouraging smile. With a trembling hand, she pointed to herself, then made the familiar running motion with her hand, and finally, pointed back as if the forest was still behind her. Me. Run. Forest. Minato's expression softened, but his brows furrowed slightly. Her body tensed, frustration building as she realized Minato didn't understand her. She glanced at Kakashi then, her green eyes shimmering with unshed tears, her body still tense with uncertainty. Help me. Kakashi, still watching the girl, cleared his throat softly. She's asking to go back to the forest. Minato let out a quiet sigh, a deep sadness settling into his features. He knew what the girl was asking, freedom, a return to the only life she knew, but they couldn't just let her go, not yet. I wish we could let her go back, Minato said softly, his voice laced with regret. But it's not that simple. The girl watched him intently, her brows furrowing as she tried to make sense of the words she couldn't understand and turned back to Kakashi. Slowly, Kakashi brought his hand to his chest, signaling me, then pointed to the girl, indicating you. He then made the familiar circle on his open palm, the sign for together, before letting out the familiar sound of safe. Me. You. Safe. Together. But the girl didn't respond the way Kakashi had hoped. Instead of calming, she shook her head, her expression growing more frantic. She backed away, mimicking again, me, run, forest, repeating me over and over with more urgency each time. Kakashi's heart sank. She doesn't trust me anymore. That realization cut deep. He could see it in her eyes, how she looked at him like he was no different from the others. Just another threat. The bond they had begun to build, fragile as it was now shattered. His mind scrambled for a way to fix it. Think, Kakashi, think. He had nothing left, no more signs, no more gestures she would believe in. Then, his thoughts drifted to his Niken, the way they'd communicate with him, even in the toughest situations. What would they do? Suddenly Kakashi let out a soft, sad purr, the kind of sound he had heard his Niken make when they were hurt or trying to soothe someone. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't enough, but it was all he had left to offer. The effect was immediate. The girl froze, mid-gesture, her frantic hands slowly dropping to her sides as her wide, startled eyes locked onto him. She blinked, her breath catching in her throat as if the sound had reached her in a way nothing else had. Her chest rose and fell in shallow breaths as she tilted her head ever so slightly. She could sense his sorrow, the genuine sadness in his attempt to reconnect with her. For a moment, she hesitated, her body tensing as if she might run again. Kakashi's heart ached, but he continued the soft purr, hoping against hope that she would understand. I'm sorry. I didn't protect you the way I should have. When her wild gaze and posture softened, Kakashi's hands repeated the motions, slower this time, as if trying to convey his sorrow through every movement. Me. You. Safe. Together. The girl's eyes followed his hands. She hesitated for a moment, then she brought her hand to her chest, to his Mori? Her voice was soft, uncertain, as she asked the question. Together in the forest? Kakashi's heart twisted. He swallowed, his throat tight, and slowly shook his head. With deliberate care, he made the circle on his palm for together. Sado. Together. His voice was gentle, almost pleading. Together in the village. The girl stared at him, her lips trembling. Mori? She repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. Kakashi hesitated, he felt utterly helpless. Sado, he said again softly. Kakashi watched as the girl's lips wobbled, her whole body trembling with the weight of his answer. Tears gathered in her wide green eyes, glistening under the dim light, threatening to spill over at any moment. It was Shiba who moved first. The Niken padded up to the girl, his tail wagging gently as he nuzzled her hand with his nose, letting out a soft, comforting whine. He pressed his warm, furry body against her leg, offering his quiet support. She blinked at the dog, her trembling hand hesitating before she slowly lowered it, resting it gently on his head. Minato stood quietly, watching the interaction between Kakashi with a mix of surprise and a little admiration for the girl. He had seen Kakashi in every kind of situation imaginable, leading missions, making impossible decisions, and surviving more loss than anyone should endure. But this side of Kakashi? Gentle isn't exactly the word that comes to mind when people think of him. The moment the girl had woken in a panic, it was Kakashi who moved first, instinctively reaching out to calm her. That doesn't surprise me. Beneath all the stoicism and sharp edges, Kakashi had always had a deeply protective nature, even if it was buried under layers of indifference and duty. But then the girl had backed away as though Kakashi was just another danger. And that had hurt him. He could see it in the way his shoulder had tensed. When she crawled toward Minato, something clenched in his chest, not for himself, but for Kakashi. And yet, Kakashi hadn't let it show. What truly surprised Minato was how Kakashi handled it after that. He didn't withdraw, didn't shut down like he might have done in the past. He didn't let the rejection crush him. Instead, he stayed close, waiting, watching, giving her the space she needed but never giving up. When did he get this patient? Kakashi didn't try to take over when she came to Minato for comfort. He simply let her, staying nearby, ready, as though knowing she would need him eventually. And yet, Minato could see the way Kakashi was hurting beneath that mask. This is more than just compassion now. It made sense to him. Kakashi had spent his whole life watching people he cared about slip through his fingers: Obito, Rin, Tsukumo. They all trusted him. They all needed him, and in his mind, he failed them. And now this girl, small and fragile, felt betrayed by him and was pulling away. Minato's chest tightened at the thought. He's carrying them all: Obito, Rin, his father. This girl has become another reminder of what Kakashi fears the most: failing to protect the people he cares about. Minato could see it so clearly now. Kakashi's determination to reach the girl wasn't just about her. It was about trying to make amends for the past. He's trying to atone for all the people he thinks he failed. But there was something more. As Minato watched Kakashi, he realized that it wasn't just guilt driving him. He genuinely wants to connect with her. It was obvious when he purred. I'll admit, that surprised me. Kakashi, the proud, solitary figure who had always seemed so distant and aloof, was here now willing to show vulnerability, to connect with another person on a deeper level, was purring like one of his Niken, all to reach a scared, confused girl. If I didn't see it with my own eyes, I wouldn't believe it. The thought almost made him smile, but the situation was too delicate for humor. Still, it had worked. Kakashi had always been good at understanding things, whether it was jutsu, strategies, or complex theories. He could break them down effortlessly, mastering them with the kind of focus that made him a natural genius. But understanding people? I never really expected that to translate. And yet, now that Minato thought about it, it kind of made sense. The problem was, Kakashi often forgot to show the same understanding to himself. Kakashi had a way of seeing through the surface of things, and now here he is, purring in front of Anbu, trying to show this girl that it's safe. I bet he didn't expect that in his Anbu career review. Minato wondered if this was a new side of Kakashi that had always been there, hidden beneath his tough exterior. Or perhaps it was a result of his experiences, of the pain and loss he had endured. Whatever the reason, it was clear that Kakashi was changing, growing. As Minato watched Kakashi interact with the girl, he felt a sense of hope. Perhaps there was still a chance for healing. Perhaps Kakashi could finally find peace. Perhaps this girl could help him. Minato remained kneeling beside the girl, his calm blue eyes flicking between her and Kakashi. The girl was trembling, on the verge of breaking down, and as much as Minato wanted to offer her comfort, he knew there was only so much he could do. How did it come to this? Minato wondered, his gaze flickering over the masked Anbu operatives, his patience wearing thin. This should have never gone this far. Minato let out a slow breath, anger simmering beneath the surface. How could this happen under my watch? He hadn't even known the girl existed until Kakashi stumbled upon her. His Anbu, his village, had failed to inform him of the situation, and now a frightened child was caught in the crossfire, her trembling figure still tucked against Shiba. Minato clenched his fists subtly at his sides. Anbu should have reported everything to me immediately. He was Hokage, after all. Every major decision, especially those involving potential threats to the village, should have passed through his hands. His sharp blue eyes darted toward the interrogator standing awkwardly to the side. And what was he thinking? Or is this more than just negligence? Minato's mind raced as he pieced together the oddities of the situation. Keeping me out of the loop, it feels deliberate. The only reason he even knew about her was because Kakashi had randomly encountered her in the streets. If not for that chance meeting, what would have happened with her? The thought struck him with a cold clarity. Could Danzo have something to do with this? The more he thought about it, the more it made sense. Danzo'd do anything if he thought it served the village, or more accurately, his twisted version of what was best for it. If Danzo's involved. Minato's gaze flicked to Tiger, who remained stoic, his stance just a little too rigid. Tiger's one of the more experienced Anbu, but his demeanor and the interrogator, who hadn't met Minato's eyes once, was looking more and more uncomfortable as the seconds ticked by. This too. He slowly stood up, his voice was quiet but laced with a calm, controlled anger. This situation has been mishandled from the start. I should have been informed the moment she was brought into custody. Fox and Hawk exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable under his scrutiny. Tiger remained stoic, but Minato didn't miss the subtle shift in his posture, tense, defensive. His eyes hardened as they landed on the interrogator, who still had the nerve to look indifferent, as though nothing was wrong. And you? Protocol or not, you overstepped. This is not how we treat people, especially not children. The interrogator stiffened but said nothing, his face pale beneath Minato's scrutiny. He knows this is not protocol, he was taking orders. If Root is involved, Minato's suspicion deepened, the pieces of the puzzle slowly coming together in his mind. They have agents mixed with the normal troops. Agents that will not listen to me. With a steady breath, Minato straightened, his expression once again calm and resolute. We're done here for tonight. The girl will be relocated immediately. Minato turned to the others. I want a full report by morning. Everything, how she got here, who gave the orders, and every single decision made from the moment she was brought in. I want the truth on my desk. From each of you. Is that clear? As one, everyone in the room answered yes, Hokage-sama. He straightened, his authority undeniable. She's under my protection from here on out. For tonight, she stays with me. Fox and Hawk exchanged a quick glance, clearly surprised by the decision, but neither objected. Even Tiger, who had been the most resistant, remained silent. It was clear that once the Hokage had spoken, the matter was settled. Minato turned back to Kakashi. He had already been staying at his home, keeping watch over Kushina during her pregnancy as part of his ANBU duties. You still have a mission, Kakashi. You'll be staying with me, as planned. You'll keep an eye on her as well. Kakashi straightened, his gaze locking with Minato's. Yes, Hokage-sama. Though his answer was immediate and professional, Minato could see the flicker of relief in Kakashi's eye. He could understand that relief. This whole situation with the girl felt off, and knowing these weren't his ANBU, he couldn't shake the nagging worry about what they might have already done to her. Had Root already sunk their claws into her? Minato's curiosity was now tinged with a growing fury. What has been done to this child? What secrets were being hidden from him? He needed answers, and he needed them now. Before we leave, Minato said, I want to see where she was first held. The interrogator visibly flinched at his words, his gaze darting nervously to the ground. Fox and Hawk both stiffened as well, but it was Tiger who spoke up, his tone even but cautious. Hokage-sama, I don't think. You weren't asked to think, Minato interrupted, his voice sharp but controlled. I want to see the place myself. Now, his tone sharp enough to cut through steel. I want to see the place myself. Now, his tone sharp enough to cut through steel. Minato glanced at Kakashi and then down at Shiba. Kakashi, lend me Shiba to confirm the room, Minato said, his voice steady. You go on ahead to Kushina with the girl. I'll meet you back at home. Kakashi hesitated, his eyes darting between Shiba and the girl, who had one trembling hand buried in the Ninken's fur. She wasn't letting go, her grip tight. Kakashi sighed softly. Great. She's not letting go without a fight. Understood, Hokage-sama, he replied, though his voice was lined with reluctance. Kakashi knelt beside the girl, Shiba wagging his tail, giving her a reassuring nuzzle. Hey, I need to borrow Shiba for a little while, Kakashi said gently, his hand moving slowly to demonstrate the sign for together, then separated his hands. The girl's brows furrowed, confusion and fear flickering in her wide green eyes. Shiba will come back, Kakashi added, nodding to Shiba, who gave a low, soft whine and nudged the girl's hand with his nose. Her grip on the Niken tightening momentarily before she hesitantly let go, her hand shaking. That was easier than expected. Shiba stepped away, his tail brushing the girl's leg gently as he moved to Minato's side. Maybe she understands more than I thought. The group began making their way through the narrow corridors of the tea building. The girl, now walking a few paces behind, stuck close to Kakashi, her small form dwarfed by the towering ANBU around her. Her eyes darted nervously around the unfamiliar surroundings, her grip on Kakashi's wrist tightening as they moved through the closing facility. When they arrived at an intersection, Kakashi instinctively turned towards the path leading to the exit, guiding the girl in the same direction. Minato, however, glanced at Tiger. "Tiger, accompany them," he ordered, a subtle edge to his tone. "No," Kakashi cut in, his voice firm and immediate, surprising even himself. "Why did I say that? Hawk should go with us." Minato raised an eyebrow, glancing between Kakashi and Tiger. It wasn't difficult to pick up on Kakashi's unease. Minato gave a small, approving nod. "All right. Hawk, go with them," he said, his tone calm, but the decision final. Hawk stepped forward, his silent presence offering some reassurance to Kakashi. Tiger didn't react at all. Kakashi continued talking toward the exit, Hawk trailing quietly behind them. They made their way through a few more corridors, the faint hum of flickering lights echoing in the silence. After a short distance, however, the girl was slowing down, her steps becoming more hesitant. He turned his head slightly and saw her casting quick, anxious glances behind her. "We're going this way," he said softly. The girl's eyes darted behind her, clearly torn. Is she still worried about Shiba? Thinking quickly, Kakashi mimicked Shiba with his hands, raising them to resemble paws as he tilted his head slightly, just like Shiba would do. It was a crude imitation of the Nikken, but it was enough to catch the girl's attention. "If anyone else gets a wind of this, I'll never live it down." She blinked at him, her confusion momentarily replaced by curiosity. Then, to his surprise, a small, light laugh escaped her, the sound soft but unmistakable. It was the first time he had heard anything close to laughter from her, and for a brief moment, the tension between them eased. A hint of relief softened her tense expression. Kakashi blinked, caught off guard. She laughed, his heart warmed slightly. He then made the sign for safety. "Shiba will be okay," he added gently. Despite the small moment of levity, the girl took a slow, deliberate step backward, her gaze shifting back to the corridor with a determined glint in her eyes. She reached down to Kakashi's wrist, her small fingers gripping him with renewed resolve, pulling him slightly. Kakashi frowned in confusion. Why does she want to go back? He had already told her Shiba would be fine, and she seemed to understand. But her persistence, she isn't going to let it go. With a sigh of resignation, Kakashi gave in. "All right," he murmured softly, his tone laced with curiosity. "Guess we'll follow her for now." He let her guide him, following her lead as she retraced their steps through the twisting corridors. How does she know where to go? Her grip on his wrist never loosened, her steps hesitant but determined. After several turns, they finally reached the others, who were now standing in front of a small iron door. She knew exactly the way. Minato stood at the front, his sharp blue eyes fixed on the door, while Shiba wagged his tail gently beside him. Minato turned towards Kakashi and lifted an eyebrow, to which Kakashi just shrugged. "I'm not sure yet," Kakashi said, his voice calm. He felt the girl tugging at his wrist again. There was an urgency in her movements now. She darted forward, reaching for Shiba. The Nikken gave a soft, reassuring bark as she wrapped her arms around him and picked him up to her chest. Shiba wagged his tail softly, sensing her need for comfort. Kakashi didn't react, his attention on the girl who had let go of his wrist but stayed close. "Open it," Minato said to the interrogator, his tone commanding. The girl's eyes never left the door, her breath quickening as if bracing herself for what she would find on the other side. The interrogator fumbled slightly as he approached the door. "He smells nervous." The door creaked open slowly, revealing a dark, damp room inside. The girl hesitated for a moment, her breath quickening as she stared into the room. Then, with renewed resolve, she took a deep breath and stepped forward. Her eyes remained glued to the floor. Her steps were slow and cautious, as though the memories of this place weighed her down. She moved toward the back of the room, where a small, metal cabinet stood. She turned to look up at Minato with determined eyes. She held Shiba up to her head. Shiba scrambled up her small frame and perched himself on her head. He was still small enough to manage it, though his added weight made her stumble slightly. There was something endearing about the sight of the small dog perched like a crown on the girl's head. Cute. But Kakashi could see the tension in her small shoulders, the way her hands tightened into fists. With a decided nod, the girl pointed toward the cabinet, her resolve clear in the sharpness of her gesture. Without turning away from her, he called out to the interrogator. "Well, what are you waiting for?" The interrogator tensed, and though his expression remained carefully neutral, Kakashi smelt the faint increase in his scent, a mix of anxiety and hesitation. With a reluctant sigh, he shuffled toward the cabinet. There was a soft click as the lock disengaged. The girl immediately stepped forward, her small form darting past the interrogator with surprising speed. She wasted no time in opening one of the drawers before closing it tightly and opening the one under it. Her movements were frantic now, her small hands moving quickly as she searched for something. Behind her, the group saw Sheba slightly tense up when the girl opened the first drawer. What? She moved to the others and rifled through its contents, her small hands moving quickly and efficiently. In one of the drawers, she paused, pulling out a small, faded piece of fabric. She handed it to Sheba, who obediently took it in his mouth, his little tail wagging as she purred softly at him. It was a sound Kakashi thought meant something like, "Hold." She returned her focus to the drawer, shifting through more items, her hands brushing away things that clearly didn't interest her until, at last, she found what she had been looking for. Slowly, with a tenderness that seemed out of place for a child so young and wild, she withdrew a small clump. The entire room watched in silence as she held the object close to her chest, pressing it tightly with both hands as a soft, happy purr rumbled in her throat. It was the kind of sound that vibrated through the quiet, filling the space with a gentle warmth. She rocked slightly on her feet, her eyes closed for a brief moment as if lost in the comfort of whatever it was she had retrieved. Kakashi moved closer to her. "What is it?" he asked, his gaze lingering on the object she clutched so tightly. She just pressed the bundle tighter against herself, her purr deepening as she glanced between Minato and Kakashi. Her way of saying, "This is mine." "Okay then, I am not touching that." Something told him she would bite him if he tried. She started to walk toward the door, her small frame still clutching the bundle protectively. As she passed by Kakashi, her fingers found his sleeve and tugged urgently, pulling him toward the exit. "Leave. Now." Kakashi allowed her to pull him along, his own curiosity and concern growing. He glanced over his shoulder at Minato, his eyes narrowing slightly as he tried to read the situation. Minato gave a small nod, signaling him to go. Just as they were crossing the threshold, Sheba looked at Minato. "It smells lightly of blood." "The cabinet," he muttered tensely. Minato's reaction was immediate, his entire body tensing as if an electric current had passed through him. His sharp blue eyes flicked toward the cabinet, narrowing with a cold, calculating edge. "Blood?" His hands clenched into fists, the muscles in his jaw tightening as he fought to keep his composure. Minato murmured quietly to Hawk. "Make sure they get to my house safely this time." Hawk gave a curt nod before stepping into the hallway. As soon as they were outside, the change in the girl was immediate. The tension in her shoulders relaxed, and her grip on Kakashi's sleeve loosened slightly. She wasn't tugging him forward in fear anymore. Now it was almost as if she was brimming with some kind of energy that Kakashi hadn't seen before. Her steps were quicker, her gaze sharper, and she even started looking around more curiously. Hawk, walking behind them, let out a soft chuckle. "Impressive," he said, his voice low but laced with surprise. "The way she led you out, she knew exactly where to go, didn't she?" Kakashi blinked, his mind briefly drifting to how she had tugged him through the labyrinth of corridors without hesitation. How did she do that? It didn't make sense for a child to navigate the building so easily, yet there she was, almost guiding him as though she knew the place by heart. He glanced down at her, still gripping his sleeve, now with a bit more confidence in her steps. "She's full of surprises." The girl stopped suddenly, her eyes locking onto Kakashi's. Without warning, she gestured with her hand, mimicking a running motion. Her face lit up with excitement as if she had just remembered something incredibly fun. Kakashi raised an eyebrow, already sensing what was coming. "No way. Does she want to?" "Run?" he asked, his voice carrying a hint of amusement and disbelief. "You want to run again?" Her eyes sparkled, the faintest grin tugging at her lips as she nodded and mimicked his words. "Run?" She tilted her head slightly, the words sounding new and curious on her tongue. Kakashi couldn't help but chuckle softly, though part of him was wary. Running through the village at this hour? Not a great idea. But the look on her face was enough to make him feel bad for even considering saying no. "Yes, run," he confirmed, making the hand sign for it. Her eyes lit up even more as she mimicked the gesture, her fingers copying his movements with surprising accuracy. "Run. Run," she repeated, her voice a little stronger now, her eagerness clear. But Kakashi couldn't just let her take off through the village, not with Hawk watching, and definitely not when they still needed to head back. "Maybe later," he added, shaking his head slightly. The girl's face fell instantly, her shoulders slumping in disappointment. She looked so dejected that Kakashi nearly reconsidered. "Great, now I feel like the bad guy." Sheba, still perched awkwardly on top of her head, held the fabric in his mouth like a proud prize, his tail wagging softly in rhythm with her steps. But the weight of the small dog, although not much, was starting to show in the girl's posture. Her neck tilted slightly as she continued walking, her shoulders hunching just a little more with each step. But just as quickly as the sadness appeared, it vanished. Her eyes suddenly gleamed with a new kind of excitement. She pointed ahead, then at a nearby tree, her expression practically begging for something. She's like a puppy, all full of energy. Kakashi blinked. Now what? She pointed again, this time at the tree, then looked up at Kakashi expectantly. Tree? Kakashi ventured, tilting his head. Is this some kind of game? Tree, she echoed, her voice full of wonder as if she had just discovered something magical in the word. Oh, I see. Kakashi felt a small smile tug at his lips. She wants to learn. The idea of teaching her words hadn't even crossed his mind until now, but she seemed eager, hungry for knowledge in a way that almost caught him off guard. The girls scanned their surroundings again, her gaze flicking over various objects before landing on the moon hanging low in the sky. She pointed at it with a look of determination. Moon, Kakashi said, following her gaze. Moon, she repeated softly, her eyes wide as she gazed up at the glowing orb above them. She's soaking this up. Kakashi found himself strangely fascinated by how quickly she picked up on things. It wasn't just the words, it was how she paid attention, how focused she became once she decided to learn something. There was a quiet determination behind her curious nature, something that told him she wasn't just a frightened child. Hawk, who had been watching from a few paces behind, let out a low whistle. She's picking this up faster than some genin I've trained, he said with a smirk behind his mask. Hataki-sensei, you might have a prodigy on your hands. Kakashi shot him a look. Hataki-sensei? Really? The girl's excitement grew with each new word she learned. She pointed at a lamp, at the stones on the path, at anything that caught her eye, and each time, Kakashi would give her the word, and she would echo it back with a sense of accomplishment that seemed to brighten her entire demeanor. By now, Hawk was watching the exchange with quiet amusement. She's like a sponge, he commented softly, glancing at Kakashi. She's going to have you talking nonstop if you keep this up. His tone had that teasing edge. Kakashi nodded absently, still watching the girl as she gestured toward another object, her eyes gleaming with anticipation. She's fast, he agreed, though part of him wondered just how much she had already known before now. She's more aware than I thought. As they continued toward Minato's house, the girl kept pointing at things, her pace quickening as though each word filled her with more energy. Kakashi found himself drawn into the strange rhythm of their walk, the steady exchange of words and repetitions. This is kinda fun. Out of nowhere, she stopped dead in her tracks. Without a word, she reached up to the top of her head, where Shiba had been perched, and gently lifted the small Niken off her head. She turned around and, without any warning, handed Shiba to Hawk. Hawk stared down at the Niken, clearly caught off guard. Shiba, still holding the small piece of fabric in his mouth, growled lowly, clearly unimpressed with being passed off like a piece of luggage. Hawk raised an eyebrow, glancing at Kakashi as if to say, "Really?" Kakashi merely shrugged, silently amused by the whole exchange. Welcome to her craziness. The girl, now free of her canine companion, narrowed her eyes in concentration and reached for the fabric that Shiba had been holding. She took it back with a soft purr, as though reassuring Shiba that she still valued him. Then, with surprising precision, she started pulling her hair into a messy ponytail using the fabric as a makeshift hair tie. Hair? This is the big emergency? I mean, okay. Her face was dead serious, as if this task required her utmost focus. Kakashi watched, both bewildered and impressed by how she'd suddenly decided to get practical. When she was satisfied with her handiwork, she turned back to Kakashi with that same determined look in her eyes. Her hands moved slowly, deliberately, as she formed the hand sign for home. Home, she said, her voice clear and confident as she looked up at him expectantly, waiting for confirmation. Kakashi nodded, feeling a small swell of pride. Yes, home, he confirmed, mirroring her hand sign. The girl's face brightened, her lips curving into a small smile, but she wasn't done yet. It was as though something clicked in her mind, and now she was determined to test herself. She moved on to the next word. She pointed at the nearby tree, then did a clumsy version of the hand sign Kakashi had used earlier for tree. Tree, she said, her brows furrowed in concentration. Kakashi nodded again, a slight smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Yes, tree. Hawk, who was still holding Shiba, who seemed less than thrilled about the whole situation, glanced down at the girl with amusement in his eyes. She's making hand signs for everything now? Hawk asked, a smirk forming behind his mask. You really are turning her into a little ninja. Kakashi almost laughed, though he suppressed it. Shinobi, she certainly has the focus for it. But what stood out to him most was how quickly she adapted. The girl, completely focused, ignored Hawk's comment and moved on to the next word. She gestured toward the rocks lining the path. This one seemed to stump her for a moment, as she tried to figure out what kind of hand sign could possibly represent rock. After a few false starts, she eventually settled on a simple tap of her fist against her palm. "Rog," she said, looking up at Kakashi once again for approval. Kakashi couldn't help but laugh softly. "Close enough." "Yes, rock." The girl smiled, satisfied with her progress, and continued her personal test. She repeated each word she had learned, following them with her makeshift hand signs. Sometimes she struggled, but each time she succeeded, her face would light up with pure joy. Kakashi watched her with a mix of amusement and admiration. She's creating her own language, he thought, realizing how clever the girl truly was. She might be more of a genius than I am. Shiba, who had finally resigned to his fate in Hawk's arms, let out a quiet huff, his eyes following the girl's every move. Hawk, noticing the little ninkin's annoyance, gave him a gentle pat on the head. "Don't worry, Shiba," Hawk said, his tone teasing. "Looks like you're off duty for now." Kakashi, catching the exchange, shot a glance at Hawk. "You know, Shiba doesn't take orders from just anyone." Hawk chuckled, glancing back at the Niken in his arms. "I'll take my chances." The girl, oblivious to the banter behind her, continued her mini-review session, occasionally glancing at Kakashi for approval or correction. "Hawk may be right, I am gonna turn into a chatterbox." Each time, he responded with patience and encouragement, watching as her confidence grew with each new word. Finally, after she had gone through nearly all the words she had learned, the girl stopped, her eyes scanning Kakashi as if searching for something. Suddenly, she pointed to her head, fingers tugging slightly at the ends of her ponytail, then looking at Kakashi with a questioning gaze. Kakashi raised an eyebrow. "Hair?" he asked, reaching up to gently pat his own messy silver strands. Her eyes lit up, nodding quickly as if to say yes, that's it. She mimicked his motion, running her fingers through her own hair, clearly pleased with the new word. Hair. But she wasn't done yet. Her brow furrowed in concentration as she fumbled with her hands, trying to communicate something more. She made the sign for moon, then for tree, and even let out a soft hum, her eyes darting between Kakashi and Shiba, who wiggled in Hawk's arms as if trying to help. "That sounds like when my Niken likes something." Kakashi blinked, piecing together the strange mix of signs. Moon? Tree? Purring? What's she trying to say? He didn't have to think much more before Shiba answered for him, beautiful. His expression was of pure confusion as he glanced back at her. Beautiful? Shiba let out a bark of agreement, and her face lit up with excitement, and she nodded enthusiastically. Beautiful? She echoed, her eyes gleaming with curiosity, which earned her an enthusiastic yeah from Shiba. Just as the word left his lips, Kakashi suddenly felt a shift behind him. Hawk was watching the entire interaction with a devilish grin forming beneath his mask, his eyes narrowing in amusement. He could already see where this was heading, and he was more than ready to enjoy the show. Before Kakashi could react, the girl pointed directly at him, her face lighting up with a soft smile. "You. Hair. Beautiful," she declared, looking pleased with herself for stringing the sentence together. Kakashi felt his entire soul short-circuit. Wait, what? His brain screeched to a halt. Beautiful? My hair? He could feel the heat rising up his neck like a chakra surge gone wrong. His heart stuttered. His mouth opened, closed, opened again like a fish out of water. His hands flailed for a split second before clamping to his sides. Abort. Abort. Hawk, on the other hand, couldn't hold it in. Pfft. A barely contained snort burst out from behind his mask, and that was it. What? Kakashi spluttered, his voice coming out as a high-pitched squeak. Why am I malfunctioning? The blush spread even faster. He felt like his mask was about to catch on fire. He clutched the back of his neck as if that would somehow stop the embarrassing redness from consuming him whole. Hawk let out an audible laugh this time, unable to keep it together any longer. Well, Hataki? Looks like you've got yourself an admirer, he teased, his voice practically bubbling over with amusement. Kakashi whipped his head toward Hawk, his eyes wide and horrified. That's not, he started, but Hawk raised his hands in mock surrender, still holding Shiba, clearly relishing every second of Kakashi's misery. Hey, no judgment, Hawk said, grinning like a Cheshire cat behind his mask. But I've gotta say, I've never heard anyone call your bedhead beautiful before. His voice was thick with barely contained laughter, and Shiba, in Hawk's arms, let out a small, amused huff, almost as if he was joining in on the fun. Meanwhile, the girl, completely oblivious to the emotional apocalypse she'd unleashed, simply stood there, her innocent smile beaming up at Kakashi like she just paid him the greatest compliment in the world. My hair? Kakashi's mind was spiraling out of control. Beautiful? Hair? My hair? Still bright red and now awkwardly scratching the back of his head like an absolute idiot, he managed to mutter, thanks, his voice barely louder than a whisper. Get it together, Kakashi. Hawks let out a loud, dramatic cough, which was clearly meant to cover another laugh. I'm never living this down. Kakashi could feel the heat from his blush intensifying again, to the point where it felt like his entire face was on fire. Great, now I'm a walking tomato. Groaning, Kakashi desperately tried to regain his composure. Let's just get to Minato's house, he grumbled, turning so fast he almost tripped over his own feet. He set off at a brisk pace, hoping to leave his embarrassment in the dust. I should avoid all human interactions from now on. Shiba let out a soft bark from Hawk's arms, which sounded suspiciously like a laugh. The girl, meanwhile, didn't miss a beat, quickly speeding up to catch up with Kakashi. She started humming to herself, casually glancing at the moon as if nothing out of the ordinary had just happened. Kakashi, still flustered beyond belief, reached up and patted his hair, his mind still replaying her words. Beautiful, huh? As soon as his hand made contact with his hair, he felt the blush creep back. Why am I like this? Hawk, who had been watching the entire scene unfold with endless amusement, let out a low chuckle. Careful, Hataki-sensei. If you get any redder, people might think you're coming down with something. Kakashi shot him a half-hearted glare, but he knew Hawk was enjoying this far too much to be intimidated. He could practically hear the smirk behind Hawk's mask. This is my life now. Forever teased about my beautiful hair. But as they continued walking, Kakashi couldn't help the small, soft smile that tugged at his lips. Maybe it's not so bad. The walk to Minato's house felt much longer than usual. Kakashi focused on the path ahead, trying to forget how heat raised on his neck at her compliment. Beside him, the girl hummed softly to herself, occasionally asking for a new word. He still answered diligently. She's like a sponge, but a cute, terrifyingly accurate sponge. Shiba, who had demanded to be let down earlier, was happily trotting along beside them, sometimes answering for him with a yipping, or giving her words he thought were important like play. As they neared Minato's house, Kakashi could feel his tension easing, though Hawk's teasing grin hadn't faded one bit. I can feel his amusement radiating from here. Before he could knock, the door creaked open, and Kushina stood at the entrance, her fiery red hair spilling over her shoulders and her hands firmly planted on her hips. Well, she said, her voice full of mock reprimand, sneaking home late, how Kakashi? Kakashi, still flustered from the events of the walk, scratched the back of his neck awkwardly. Oh, we got a bit delayed, he said, glancing down at the girl, who was now peeking up at Kushina with wide eyes. She had been so full of energy moments before, now she was completely still, shrinking behind him. Before Kakashi could answer, Hawk, of course, couldn't resist jumping in. Forgive us, Kushina-san. We had to do an emergency stop to admire Hataki-sensei's gorgeous locks. His voice was laced with light teasing, making sure to emphasize the title. Kakashi shot Hawk a sharp glare. You're not helping, Hawk. Kushina, never one to pass up an opportunity to tease, raised an eyebrow with a smirk. Oh, but just as she was about to press further, her gaze shifted to the girl hiding behind Kakashi, her small hand gripping his sleeve. Kushina's teasing expression softened instantly, replaced by curiosity and warmth. And who's this little one? Kushina murmured, her voice taking on a gentler tone. The girl shrank further, her fingers tightening on Kakashi's sleeve, her lips moving slightly as if considering speaking but remaining silent. That's Hataki's student and aficionado of Kakashi's, per her words, beautiful hair. Hawk answered with a smile on his voice. Kushina, catching the emphasis on beautiful hair, grinned. Beautiful hair, huh? Well, I always thought Kakashi had a certain flair, she teased, tossing a wink at Kakashi, who shot her a withering look. Flair? Flair? What is it with everyone and my hair today? Turning her attention back to the girl, Kushina knelt down slightly, her voice becoming soft but still playful. You've got good taste, little one. And you know, she leaned in as though sharing a big secret, her tone dropping to a mock whisper, I think I might have to agree with you on the hair thing. The girl, wide-eyed and not entirely sure what to make of the situation, moved, hiding completely behind Kakashi, gripping his sleeve tightly as if to disappear completely. Her cheeks puffed slightly, and she focused her gaze on Kushina's hands. Kushina noticed her reaction and quickly dialed back the teasing, her tone softening even more. Hey, it's okay, she said gently, reaching out but stopping just before touching the girl. You're safe here. I'm just teasing him, you know? Kakashi turned his head trying to look at the girl and nodded reassuringly. She's safe, he said quietly, his voice calm and steady. Kushina's like family. At Kakashi's words, Kushina's eyes flickered with warmth. That simple, honest statement from aloof Kakashi, calling her family, touched her deeply. A gentle smile spread across her face, a mix of pride and affection, as she realized how much that small admission meant coming from him. For a moment, the girl seemed to process what he said, and slowly, she stepped out from behind him, still staying close but no longer hiding. Her gaze flickered between Kushina and Kakashi, offering a small smile. Am I right to think that this cutie is the reason Minato left the house in a fury? Kushina said, returning the girl's smile. Looks like there was some miscommunication. Hokage-sama is handling it, Hawk responded in his usual professional yet warm tone. Kushina's brow furrowed slightly, intrigued. Miscommunication, huh? She straightened up, brushing her fiery red hair back behind her shoulders. Well, let's not just stand here in the doorway all night. You're in good hands now. Give me a few minutes, and you'll be eating the best ramen this side of Konoha. As they stepped inside, the girl remained glued to Kakashi's side, but the earlier wariness was beginning to fade. The warmth of Kushina's home, the soft glow of the lights, and the smell of food seemed to relax her. She took it all in, her eyes darting around the cozy space. She is really curious. The girl took a tiny step closer to Kushina, her fingers still gripping Kakashi's sleeve. With her other hand, she pointed toward Shiba. Don't worry, I'll whip up a bowl for Shiba too, Kushina said, amused. Shiba, ever the opportunist, barked happily, clearly pleased with the idea of a meal. Just as they were settling in, Hawk lingered near the door. I'll stay out here and wait for Minato, he said, his tone casual, but with the familiar teasing edge Kakashi had grown accustomed to. Oh, and Kakashi, don't forget to brush that beautiful hair of yours before bed. Really? Again? Kakashi sighed but didn't bother to respond, knowing it would only add fuel to Hawk's teasing fire. The girl, who had been quietly observing the interaction, suddenly picked up on the now familiar words hair and beautiful, which had been tossed around far too often for Kakashi's comfort. She blinked up at him, her brow furrowing as if processing the repeated teasing. Then, without warning, she spun around to face Hawk directly, her small form standing boldly between him and Kakashi. Kakashi blinked, feeling a slight unease creeping up. Wait, what's she doing? Then, out of nowhere, she pointed straight at him. You rock. Hawk blinked, looking completely baffled. Rock? Hi. You rock, the girl repeated, her voice firm and confident. Kakashi froze. Hi. He blinked, utterly surprised. Where did she? I didn't teach her that. His mind raced, but the girl wasn't done. Before Hawk could respond, the girl continued. You rock. Path, she said, her tone more playful now, a glint of mischief in her eyes as she pointed at the path in front of them and mimicked a small kicking motion with her foot. A second of silence passed as Hawk processed what had just happened. I'm a rock on a path? His mouth opened, then closed, completely caught off guard by the playful jab. He blinked again. Did she just insult me? Shiba let out a low bark, clearly amused. Kushina, standing in the doorway, covered her mouth to stifle her laughter, her eyes shining with delight. Hearing her, Kakashi broke into a wide grin. Did she just compare Hawk to a rock you kick off the road? Oh, that's gold. He bit the inside of his cheek to keep from laughing, but his eyes betrayed him as they sparkled with amusement. She sure did, Kakashi muttered, half impressed, half amused. Where did she even come up with that? Kushina, standing in the doorway, burst into laughter. Oh my god, she said, clutching her stomach. Hawk, trying to recover from the unexpected insult, gave Kakashi a death glare. Kakashi shrugged innocently, the grin still firmly planted on his face. Hey, she's a quick learner. I just gave her the words. He glanced down at the girl, who beamed back up at him with pride. Seems like she's getting the hang of it. Hake gave a mock sigh, shaking his head dramatically. Well, I didn't see that one coming, he admitted, his voice tinged with amusement. A rock. On a path. Kicked. I've been demoted to rock status by our little genius. As Hawk mulled over the situation, he noticed it has been years since someone had teased him, and a child no less. He felt an unusual mixture of amusement and surprise in this little girl's nerve. She somehow learned how to tease from the few jabs he sent to Kakashi. Kakashi, trying to suppress his grin but failing miserably, shrugged. Looks like it. A very kickable rock, apparently. The girl watched his reaction, her gaze softening. Sensing his mock defeat, she did something that surprised everyone even more. With a gentle expression, she walked over to Hawk and, standing on her tiptoes, reached up and patted his arm, her hand small against his much larger frame. She patted him like she would console a dog, her touch light but deliberate and full with mirth. The gesture was so innocent, so childlike, that it caught Hawk completely off guard. His expression softened as he let out a laugh, a genuine, amused chuckle that filled the quiet night air. "All right, I'll take it. Rock, I am. You're something else, kid." He bent down slightly and ruffled her hair, his tone warm. "No more teasing your sensei at Pebble." The girl's eyes gleamed with pride as she turned back to Kakashi, clearly enjoying herself. Kakashi gave her a closed-eyed smile. Kushina, still giggling, wiped an imaginary tear from her eye. This kid's got brains, and a wicked sense of humor. Shiba, clearly entertained, wagged his tail as he circled Hawk's legs, almost as if he, too, was joining in on the fun. Hawk, his heart now thoroughly softened by the girl's actions, stood up again, still chuckling softly. "I didn't expect to be insulted and comforted in the same breath," he admitted, his voice quieter now. "She's really clever, using new words like that." "She's sharp." Too sharp, Kakashi thought, feeling a strange sense of pride swell in his chest. Hawk lingered for a moment. He glanced at Kakashi one last time. "Looks like you've got yourself a little team now, Hataki. Try not to mess it up." Kakashi sighed, half exasperated but mostly amused. "Just wait outside, will you?" Kushina, still clearly entertained, opened the door wider. "Well, come on in. You've had a long day, and it looks like Hawk here's had his ego bruised." As they stepped further into the house, the door to Minato and Kushina's home closed softly behind them. The warmth from Kushina's home enveloped them, soft lantern light casting a gentle glow across the room. The girl's eyes were wide and darting around, taking in the space with a mix of curiosity and cautious wonder. Kushina was already moving toward the kitchen, her vibrant energy contagious as she called out over her shoulder, "You kids must be starving. Ramen's almost ready. You'll get a bowl so big, you won't need seconds." Shiba, with his nose already picking up the scent of something delicious, eagerly trotted after her, his little tail wagging in anticipation. Kakashi sighed. "I'll have to thank Kushina and Minato for even feeding my Niken." Kakashi led the girl to the kitchen. With her amount of curiousness, she'll have a blast watching Kushina cook. As they stepped into the kitchen, the aroma of ramen filled the air, causing the girl to pause, her nose twitching curiously. She sniffed the air with a lot of intensity. That's right, this is probably the first time she smelled anything like this. The girl watched Kushina work, her eyes wide with interest, as if trying to understand every detail of what was happening. Kushina, sensing the girl's curiosity, turned and smiled warmly at her. "You like cooking, little one?" she asked gently, her tone inviting. The girl hesitated for a moment before pointing at the stove, her gaze flicking to Kakashi for help. Kakashi, sitting down at the table, leaned forward slightly. "She doesn't know how to talk yet," he explained softly. "But she's trying to learn." Kushina's eyes softened. "I see," she said, nodding in understanding. "Kakashi-sensei." She finished smirking. Kakashi ignored the teasing and leaned forward slightly, using simple words and hand signs, pointing to the stove and mimicking a stirring motion. "Cooking," he said, then pointed to the girl and made a big fake smile. "You like?" The girl watched him closely, her expression thoughtful. "Fire?" She then pointed at some meat cooking. "She's making her own connections now, impressive." Kakashi nodded. "Yes, that's cooking too." "This is called a pot," Kushina said, pointing at the large metal container simmering on the stove. The girl's eyes followed her finger, and she mimicked the word quietly, as if testing it out for herself. "Pot," she whispered, her voice barely audible but filled with determination. Kushina's smile widened, and she continued the lesson, pointing to various utensils and ingredients as she worked. "This is a ladle and this is broth." Each time, the girl echoed the words, her voice growing a little stronger with each repetition. When the bowls were ready, Kakashi gently guided the girl to the table and sat down beside her. Kushina first brought out a bowl for Shiba, leaving it at the floor close to the table. Kushina placed a steaming bowl of ramen in front of the girl. "All right, dig in. This is gonna be the best meal you've ever had, guaranteed." The girl leaned in, sniffing the rich broth, her eyes narrowing slightly as she processed the unfamiliar scent. Then she simply stared at it. Kakashi raised an eyebrow, waiting to see what she would do. Is she going to eat it, or just keep staring at it? Kushina, who had been quietly observing her, noticed her curiosity and smiled. "Go ahead," she encouraged gently, nodding toward the ramen. The girl hesitated for a moment longer before reaching out with her small hands, tentatively grabbing a single noodle. But the moment she touched it, she yanked her hand back, her eyes widening in surprise as the hot broth stung her fingers. Despite the shock, she quickly blew on her fingers and then, more cautiously, tried again, this time with more success. Efficient and brave. Kakashi watched as she took a tentative bite, her eyes lighting up as the rich flavors hit her tongue. She likes it. Good. I'm not sure how I'd explain to Kushina that her cooking scared her off. Encouraged, she began eating more energetically, using her hands to scoop up the noodles and vegetables with increasing speed. Her enthusiasm was contagious, and Kushina couldn't help but laugh softly at the sight. Kushina didn't mind the drops of broth falling all around the table. In fact, she seemed delighted by the girl's unrestrained enthusiasm for the food. The room filled with the sounds of soft chewing and the occasional hum of approval from the girl. She's really going for it. But then, as the girl slurped another noodle, her gaze shifted to Kakashi and Kushina. Her eyes widened in surprise as she noticed that Kakashi's bowl was already half empty, and yet his mask was still on, and he was calmly chewing, as if nothing unusual had happened. Oh, she noticed. She blinked, her hands pausing midair, completely puzzled by how Kakashi had managed to eat so quickly without her noticing. She stared at him, trying to figure out his secret, but Kakashi just continued to chew nonchalantly, his visible eye crinkling slightly in what she could only assume was a smile. Just a ninja eating his ramen super fast. Kushina, noticing the girl's confused expression, let out a soft laugh. Kakashi's got some tricks up his sleeve, huh? She teased, nudging him playfully. He's a master of the ninja art of stealth eating. The girl gazed at Kushina but didn't catch any of her words except for eating. Her eyes then flicked between Kakashi's bowl and his mask, her brow furrowing in concentration as she tried to make sense of it. Calm, she's not going to figure it out. Nobody has. Kakashi, sensing her curiosity, finished chewing and gave her a small nod. It's a secret, he said quietly, his tone light but with a hint of mischief. He then brought his hand to his lips and mimicked a zipping motion, his expression playful but gentle. The girl tilted her head slightly, still trying to understand what he was doing. She wasn't entirely sure what it meant. Woof! Shiba interrupted his eating to bark, and it seemed that was what the girl needed to understand what Kakashi was trying to say, as her eyes shined with recognition and she nodded at him. Her gaze then flickered to his hands. The girl then turned to Kushina and watched how she was eating. She noticed how they both held their chopsticks, deftly picking up noodles and other ingredients with ease. She stopped mid-slurp, her eyes narrowing in concentration as she studied their movements. Without warning, she dropped her noodle back into the bowl and grabbed the chopsticks beside her, determined to copy them. But as soon as she tried to hold the chopsticks, she realized her hands were slick with broth and bits of food. Kushina, noticing the girl's predicament, handed her a napkin with a warm smile. Here, wipe your hands with this. She then followed by cleaning her own hands so the girl could copy her. The girl took the napkin, hesitated for a moment, then carefully wiped her hands clean. She seemed to study the napkin, as if trying to understand its purpose, before setting it down neatly beside her bowl. Always observing, always learning. Once she was satisfied, she picked up the chopsticks again, this time with more confidence. She tried to mimic Kakashi's hold on them, but her fingers fumbled with the unfamiliar tools. Seeing her struggle, Kakashi leaned in slightly, showing her how he held his chopsticks, his movements slow and deliberate. Like this, he said softly, demonstrating the proper grip. The girl watched him intently, her eyes locked on his hands as she tried to mirror his actions. After a few attempts, she finally managed to pick up a noodle, her face lighting up with a mix of surprise and triumph. She looked up at Kakashi, her expression asking for confirmation. She learned it after just a few minutes, and without flying noodles. Kakashi gave her an approving nod, his eye crinkling with a smile. You got it, he said, again being gobsmacked by her cleverness. Maybe being surprised is going to be my new normal. They ate in comfortable silence, the only sounds being the clinking of bowls and the soft slurping of noodles. By the time she finished, it wasn't just her hands covered in broth, but her satisfied face as well. She used her newfound napkin skills to clean herself up, albeit a bit clumsily. She's got this whole eating thing down. Well, sort of. Kushina suddenly perked up with a mischievous grin. You know, I think I've got something else that'll make your night even better. Kakashi raised an eyebrow. More food? He asked, glancing down at the girl, who had finished her noodles with such gusto he wouldn't be surprised if she wasn't hungry anymore. Kushina winked, already heading toward the pantry. Not just any food, Kakashi. She returned with a small box, holding it up like it was a precious artifact. Opening it, she pulled out a few chocolate-covered sticks, offering one to the girl with a smile. Here, try this. You're going to love it. The girl eyed the thin stick with curiosity, hesitating for a moment before gingerly taking it from Kushina's hand. She inspected it from every angle, sniffed it cautiously, and then took a tentative nibble. The reaction was instantaneous and dramatic. Her eyes went as wide as saucers, and her whole body froze, as if she had just discovered a hidden treasure. Did she just find the meaning of life in a Pocky stick? Without any further hesitation, she took a bigger bite, her face lighting up with pure, unrestrained joy. She stared at the Pocky like it was the greatest thing she had ever tasted, the sweet chocolate and crunchy biscuit clearly blowing her mind. She quickly stuffed the rest of it into her mouth, her eyes darting to Kushina with an almost pleading look, as if asking, "More? Please?" Kushina chuckled, thoroughly amused by the girl's reaction. "I told you. Here, sweetie, have as many as you like." The girl wasted no time, eagerly grabbing another Pocky stick and devouring it with the same enthusiasm, her face a picture of absolute bliss. She even let out a soft, contented hum as she savored the taste. Okay, now she's obsessed. Great. How am I supposed to explain to her that there are other foods out there? Even Sheba seemed intrigued, watching with wide eyes as the girl polished off her third Pocky stick. The little dog let out a quiet whine, clearly hoping for a taste, but the girl gently shook her head, holding the stick up high as if saying, "This one's mine, sorry." Kakashi watched the scene unfold, trying to keep his usual cool demeanor, but a smile tugged at the corners of his mouth. Well, I guess Pocky's the key to her heart. Kushina stood up after everyone had finished eating, stretching her arms over her head with a satisfied sigh. Well, now that we've had some food, how about a nice warm bath? She offered, her tone bright as she smiled down at the girl. Trust me, it's the perfect way to end the day. You'll feel refreshed. The girl blinked up at Kushina, tilting her head in confusion. She clearly didn't understand the word bath and just stared at Kushina, her expression a mix of curiosity and uncertainty. Right, she has no idea what that is. Sheba got her attention and took over here. Did he just seriously start cleaning himself as a cat? It worked though, and the girl nodded slowly, but as she stood up to follow Kushina, she turned and looked at Kakashi with big, pleading eyes, clearly wanting him to come along. Her gaze was so innocent, so full of trust, that Kakashi felt a pang of guilt for even thinking about leaving her alone with Kushina, despite knowing she was perfectly safe. I do not think I am the best one to explain normal life for her. Kakashi shifted uncomfortably in his seat, the weight of her stare making him squirm. Is she seriously expecting me to? He cleared his throat, scratching the back of his neck awkwardly. I think Kushina can handle this one. I'll explain the bath and then leave, alright? The girl's expression didn't change, her eyes still fixed on him as though she hadn't quite understood his reluctance. Kakashi sighed softly, knowing he couldn't just leave her hanging like that. Great. Just great. Standing up, Kakashi gestured for the girl to follow Kushina, his steps slower than usual as they made their way down the hall to the bathroom. He could feel his face already starting to heat up at the prospect of having to explain everything in the bath. This is fine. It'll be quick. Explain, then I'm out. Kushina opened the door to the bathroom, revealing a warm, inviting space filled with steam from the running bathwater. The girl's gaze darted around, taking in the unfamiliar setting. Kakashi stepped inside hesitantly, trying to find the right words. The girl tilted her head, listening and watching intently, as if trying to grasp the concept. Please let this be enough. But instead of responding verbally, she simply shrugged, then proceeded to pull her shirt off over her head, completely unfazed. Kakashi's eyes widened in pure, unfiltered panic. What the? He turned so fast he nearly crashed into the wall, his face flaming red. Oh, okay. I think that's enough explaining. He stammered, his voice an octave higher than usual. Why do I always end up in these situations? Behind him, he could hear Kushina trying not to laugh, the sound of her stifling her amusement filling the air. Kakashi, I've got this, she said, her tone both soothing and amused. Why don't you go ahead and wait outside? Kakashi, still red as a tomato, nodded furiously without turning around. Why, yeah, okay. I'll wait outside, he stammered, already halfway out the door, backing up without looking. Kakashi, his face still burning, leaned against the wall outside the bathroom, taking a deep breath to calm himself. She really has no concept of modesty. After all, who needs something like that in the forest? He shook his head, trying to shake off the embarrassment. As he finally exited the room, he let out a long, shaky breath, his heart still pounding. Note to self, avoid all situations that involve explaining baths. Forever. After the somewhat eventful bath, Kushina led the girl down the hall, her hand resting gently on her shoulder. Come on, let's get you settled in for the night, she said with a warm smile. They reached a small, cozy room with a futon already laid out and soft light filtering in from a small window. "This is where you'll sleep tonight," Kushina explained, gesturing toward the bed. "It's comfy, I promise. You'll sleep like a log." The girl, still quiet, walked into the room and examined the futon with curious eyes. She reached out, touching the blankets gingerly as though unsure of what to make of it. She turned to look at Kushina with a questioning expression. Kushina, sensing her hesitation, knelt down and patted the futon. "See? Soft and warm." For sleeping, she then tilted her head to the side and closed her eyes, making an obnoxiously loud snore. The girl laughed and looked at her expectantly. Kushina, having seen this look during dinner, understood her. "What's the word?" "Sleep," she gently answered. The girl repeated the word, sat down on the edge of the futon, fidgeting with the blankets, before giving Kushina a smile. Kushina gently ruffled the girl's hair, told her good night and left the room, leaving the door ajar. She lay down, pulling the blanket over herself, but her wide eyes remained open. She looked around the room, her gaze landing on the walls and the ceiling. The space felt too closed off, too different from what she was used to. After a few moments of restless shifting, the girl stood up, her bare feet padding softly across the wooden floor as she made her way out of the room. Silently, she wandered through the house until she found Kakashi, who was sitting alone on the porch, staring out at the night sky. Kakashi had stayed up, waiting for Minato to return, but now, even after talking to him, he found himself sitting on the porch, lost in his thoughts. Why is everything always so complicated? The cool night air brushed against his skin as he leaned back, his head resting against the railing and his hand absent-mindedly stroking Shiba's fur. The girl, unnoticed at first, quietly approached him. She stopped just behind him, tilting her head as she observed the way he sat in the dim light. When Kakashi finally realized she was there, he glanced over his shoulder. How long has she been standing there? Kakashi wondered, since he hadn't heard her nor feel her approach. What's this about? Can't sleep? He sat up, meeting her gaze, trying to figure out what was going through her mind. She stepped closer, looking around at the open sky, the cool breeze brushing past them, and then down at Kakashi, letting out a soft moon. Kakashi sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Can't sleep inside, huh?" he asked quietly, already knowing the answer. Her eyes shifting toward the trees nearby. "Of course. She's used to sleeping outside." Without another word, he stood up and stretched, motioning for her to follow him. The girl and Shiba followed him into the open yard outside Minato's house. The moonlight bathed everything in silver, the trees casting long shadows across the ground. Kakashi led her to a large tree near the fence, its trunk thick and sturdy, its branches swaying gently in the breeze. As Kakashi settled against the tree, thinking the girl would soon drift off to sleep, he heard a sudden rustling sound. He opened his eye just in time to see the girl scaling the tree with an efficiency that startled him. She moved swiftly, her small hands and feet gripping the bark with a precision that seemed unnatural. Okay, that's not normal, Kakashi thought, his brows furrowing as he watched her climb higher. She reached a spot near the middle of the tree and stopped. For a moment, she crouched, seemingly assessing the various branches, and then, with a soft huff of frustration, she poked one of the larger branches as if disappointed it wasn't the right fit. Kakashi tilted his head, bemused by her odd behavior. What is she doing? Looking for a spot to nap? She huffed again, this time louder, clearly unhappy with her options. Finally, she placed her hand on the bark of the tree, her expression growing serious. Kakashi narrowed his eye as he watched her. What is she doing now? Kakashi's eyes widened, his breath catching in his throat. Wait, what is? Before he could fully grasp the situation, the tree responded. A faint rustling sound filled the air, and slowly, the thick branch the girl was standing on began to move. It shifted, almost as if it were alive, curling down slightly to form a sort of resting place that looked almost like an expensive wood bowl. The movement was subtle but unmistakable. The tree was bending to her will. Shiba sat on his butt, muzzle open completely in shock. Kakashi stood up, eyes wide with shock as he took a step back. What? He could barely get the words out. How did you? The girl, now standing on the new crib-looking formation, turned to face him, her expression calm and matter-of-fact, as if moving a tree was the most natural thing in the world. She tilted her head slightly, as if asking why they were so surprised. He blinked, struggling to process what he had just witnessed. Did she just make a tree move? This wasn't normal chakra control, it was something entirely different. Something he hadn't seen before, her own chakra didn't even flutter. The girl, apparently satisfied with her new spot, settled down on the branch, laying her head against a small clump of leaves that had formed at one end of the bowl as if it were the softest pillow. She gave a small, content sigh, clearly pleased with her work, and glanced down at Kakashi as if to say, "See? This is better." The branch, now perfectly positioned for her comfort, cradled her as she closed her eyes. Kakashi, still stunned, stared up at her, his mind racing. What in the world? He shook his head slightly, leaning back against the trunk once more, trying to make sense of it all. That's definitely not normal. I think this isn't enough good reason to be surprised again. Kakashi jumped onto the branch beside her a long minute later, and looked at her. You just what in the kami are you? But the girl didn't respond. She was deep asleep already, looking as if she was a part of the tree. Kakashi sighed, his initial surprise giving way to resignation. What kind of? Suddenly, a flicker of movement caught his eye from the house. Kakashi's head turned, and there, staring out of a window, was Minato. The Hokage's face was barely visible, but Kakashi could see his eyes, wide as dinner plates, practically popping out of his head. Minato's usually calm and composed demeanor was nowhere to be found as he stared, his mouth slightly open in shock. Kakashi stared back, their gazes locking for a moment, both of them caught in mutual disbelief. Minato's mouth moved, trying to form words, but nothing came out. Are you seeing this too? Kakashi, still reeling, gave a slow nod. Yeah, I'm seeing it, all right. I just don't believe it. He raised his hands in a gesture of helplessness. I have no idea how or why this is happening. Minato's eyes darted back to the girl, who was now fast asleep on the branch. The Hokage blinked rapidly, then rubbed his eyes in disbelief. After a few more stunned moments, Minato shook his head and slowly retreated back from the window, disappearing from view. Guess I'll just keep an eye out in case she decides to move an entire forest next. Well, at least she's comfortable now, Kakashi muttered to himself, shaking his head in disbelief. Kakashi sat and leaned against the trunk of the tree, keeping the girl on his view. What am I even dealing with here? He let a whistle escape his lips, which had Shiba jumping up beside him. Kakashi reached out and patted Shiba absent-mindedly. But the sound of Kakashi's whistle reached the girl's ears. Slowly, her eyes fluttered open, blinking sleepily. She looked at him, studied him for a second, then glanced around as if realizing something. Her eyes widened slightly and her expression suddenly filled with guilt. She let out a small, sad purr. Is she apologizing? What for? Kakashi raised an eyebrow, surprised that she'd woken up. What? He muttered softly, more to himself than to her. He wasn't sure why she seemed upset. The girl pressed both of her palms onto the branch she was laying on, the same way she had done earlier. Kakashi watched, his eyes narrowing in confusion. She can't possibly be. Suddenly, the trunk he was leaning on shifted. No, she wouldn't. The wood groaned softly as it moved, bending in ways that a tree shouldn't naturally move. His eyes widened, and he instinctively leaned away, only to realize the tree was reshaping itself for him. Within moments, a perfect nook had formed, complete with a gently curving branch in front of him. It was almost as if the tree had formed a cradle specifically for Kakashi, as if inviting him to lean back. Oh, for the love of... Kakashi sighed. You've got to be kidding me, he muttered under his breath, cautiously reaching out to touch the newly formed nook. It felt solid, sturdy, like it had always been that way. The rough bark had smoothed out, making it feel almost soft. He couldn't help but shake his head in disbelief. So, now I've got my own personal tree bed. Great. But she wasn't finished yet. With a gentle rustle, leaves began to sprout from a thin branch in front of him. Kakashi stared in awe as the branch cradled him, its soft leaves forming a surprisingly comfortable cocoon, resembling a soft, leafy duvet. A branch duvet. Made. For. Me. The girl gave a soft, satisfied hum from above, clearly pleased with her handiwork. She looked down at Kakashi with those wide, curious eyes and gave him a small smile, like she was proud of herself for figuring out how to make him a sleeping spot. Kakashi sighed, not quite knowing how to feel about this development. He looked up at her, his gaze softening despite himself. Thanks, I think. As he cautiously settled into the nook, testing the comfort, he found that it wasn't half bad. In fact, it was surprisingly comfortable. The branch supported his back perfectly, and the leaves rustled softly overhead, creating a calming, almost serene atmosphere. She really made me a bed, he muttered under his breath, more confused than ever. The situation was far from normal. He tilted his head back to glance at the girl again, who was already half asleep again. She looked peaceful, completely unbothered by the strangeness of it all. Maybe to her, this is normal. Or maybe I'm just losing my grip on reality. Kakashi let out a long breath, allowing himself to relax as he leaned back against the tree. Well, this is different, but I guess it beats sleeping on the ground. The branch cradled him comfortably, and for the first time in what felt like hours, he felt his body start to unwind. I'll just accept it for now, maybe this is a dream. No sense in figuring it out if I'm just gonna wake up. Kakashi felt his eyelids growing heavier as the odd comfort of the tree lulled him into relaxation. It was the best sleep he has had since he was 4. Minato had dealt with a lot in his still short time as Hokage, rebuilding a village after the war, angry villagers, rogue ninjas, political disasters, but standing in front of that iron door at tea tonight, he couldn't shake the feeling that this could be the beginning of the biggest challenge of his Hokage time. He'd chosen to walk home, hoping the cool night air would help clear his head, but the peaceful glow of Konoha, bathed in starlight, seemed to mock his troubled mind, which kept circling back to the events at tea. When he opened the drawers of that cabinet, he half expected to find something horrific. Thank Kami, there were no instruments of torture, just syringes, probably where Sheba caught the scent of blood, and some old, fraying strips of clothing sewn with leaves. Hers, maybe? The rest of the cabinet contained strange items, monitors, puzzles, cards. Psychological tests, not interrogative tools. Minato sighed. They weren't trying to interrogate her, they were studying her. But why? What for? He had the girl's files tucked under his arm and planned to review them thoroughly, hoping the answer would be there. I doubt it. However, with the girl now under his roof, even with Kakashi watching over her, he didn't feel comfortable leaving Kushina, especially with the pregnancy. And his trust in Anbu was, let's say, on thin ice at the moment. Minato had known about the shadows in the village, the shinobi that operated in ethically gray areas, but this was something else. The thought of Root infiltrating his Anbu gnawed at him. He was not completely convinced on the necessity of Root, and he'd been planning to root them out for a while now, pun completely intended. But with the infiltration and tonight, the changes needed to come faster and on a much larger scale. Is this Root's doing? Is someone else's hand at play? I do not know what is worse. His house finally came into view, its dark shape a comforting presence against the night sky. The sight of it eased some of the tension in his shoulders. He was dying to see Kushina. As he neared the entrance, Hawk materialized in front of him, a shadow slipping out of the night. Minato wasn't startled. Anbu tended to have that effect, but his body tensed automatically. Hokage-sama, Hawk said, bowing slightly, the girl is taking a bath. Kushina-san is helping her. No incidents since we left tea. Good, Minato exhaled quietly, letting some of the tension slip away. But one question still nagged at him. Tell me, Hawk, why did Kakashi ask for you to accompany him and the girl instead of Tiger? Hawk hesitated for a fraction of a second before answering. I cannot speak for Hataki, but I imagine it was because Tiger forcefully knocked her out before bringing her in. Minato raised an eyebrow, his jaw tightening. And you? Do you think Kakashi made the right call? There was another pause, shorter this time. Tiger's methods wouldn't have been suitable in this situation. Minato's eyes narrowed, but he nodded. Understood. His voice remained calm, though the underlying tension was unmistakable. Thank you for your report. I'll need your full file on tonight's events by midday tomorrow. Hawk bowed slightly and disappeared into the night, leaving Minato standing close to the entrance of his home, staring at the stars again. When Minato stepped onto the porch, he found Kakashi sitting against the railing, staring out at the night, as still as a statue. The young Anbu didn't move, but Minato knew he was aware of his presence. For a moment, he just stood quietly, watching his former student. Kakashi didn't need prompting to talk, but he also didn't rush to explain things. Typical Kakashi. Minato eased down beside him. Neither said anything at first, the quiet stretching between them. It wasn't uncomfortable, it rarely was with Kakashi. He leaned back, enjoying the fleeting comfort of the still night. Eventually, though, curiosity got the better of him. So Minato broke the silence, his tone carrying a hint of teasing. How exactly did you end up babysitting a girl who can't talk? Kakashi didn't react right away, continuing to stare at the yard as if the answers were hidden in the grass. After a quiet sigh, he spoke. I was on the rooftops, noticed something odd. Next thing I know, she's purring at me and forcing me into a game of tag. He stopped, realizing how ridiculous that sounded. Thought maybe she was. He interrupted himself again, realizing he was about to sound even more ridiculous. Never mind. A what? Minato prompted, his curiosity piqued. A ninja cat, Kakashi admitted with a deadpan tone, clearly resigned to how absurd the whole situation sounded. She moves like one. The purring, it's almost like my Niken, but more feline. Minato blinked, holding back a laugh. Ninja cat? Really? Keep it together, Minato. Better not laugh so early in a conversation with Kakashi. So, she's like Pakin, but with less conversation? Minato managed to keep his face straight, but only barely. There it was, a small twitch at the corner of Kakashi's eye. For Kakashi, that was a full-on laugh. Well done, Minato. Kushina would be proud. What happened after that? Minato asked, suppressing a grin. You figured out she couldn't talk right away? Kakashi's gaze drifted back to the sky, his expression unreadable. It wasn't obvious at first. But once I tried a few things, gestures, basic hand signs, we managed to get some basic communication going. And then what? Taught her to talk, did you? Minato couldn't resist. Kakashi's head tilted slightly, his way of acknowledging the joke without reacting to it. She learns quickly. Picked up more words on the way here. Is that a compliment, Kakashi? Minato leaned forward, intrigued, but he could see Kakashi was not finished. She's smart, Kakashi admitted reluctantly, and it was probably the closest thing Minato would get to actual praise from him. Tested herself and even began connecting words. Curious too. Every little thing she sees, she wants to know the name for it. Definitely a compliment coming from Kakashi, she is probably a fellow genius. Minato watched him carefully for a moment, reading between the lines. Kakashi was always good at keeping his feelings hidden, but there were small tells, things that only someone who really knew him could see. Smart and curious? Minato asked, his tone lighter than the question. But there was seriousness in the words. You think she's dangerous? Kakashi hesitated for just a moment, something Minato noticed immediately. Not dangerous. Just unpredictable, Kakashi said. She picks things up fast, so she could be, but not yet. Minato nodded slowly. Unpredictable, huh? That could be difficult to deal with. Kakashi didn't respond right away, his gaze distant as he stared at the stars. I'll handle it. Minato smiled softly. Of course you will. She's not your responsibility, Kakashi, he said gently. Kakashi shifted slightly, his shoulders tensing in a subtle, familiar way. But he's already decided, hasn't he? Minato thought. He'll help her no matter what. He decided not to push further. Instead, Minato shifted the conversation. You had Hawk with you instead of Tiger. Why? Kakashi's gaze flickered, his tone darkening just a touch. Tiger, well, when the Anbu found us, she got defensive. I managed to calm her down, but Tiger didn't care. Just grabbed her. Knocked her out. Minato's jaw clenched, though he stayed quiet. Hawk's easier to work with, Kakashi continued, his tone flat, more factual than emotional. After a slight pause, he added, and I think she managed to charm him. Minato blinked, surprised. Charm him? Don't ask me how, Kakashi muttered, almost like he didn't want to talk about it. But she's got him. Soft spot. Kakashi's tone was telling. Kakashi, you're charmed too, aren't you? Minato smiled, but quickly hid his smile. Sounds like he's not the only one. Kakashi's posture stiffened, but he didn't reply. He didn't deny it either. Minato forward, watching him carefully. He knew Kakashi too well, but Minato wouldn't push him. Not tonight. She's interesting, Kakashi said finally, the closest to an admission he was going to get. Minato nodded, smiling to himself. Interesting, he repeated, his tone amused. I'll take that as high praise. They sat in comfortable silence for a few moments before Minato spoke again, his tone more serious. You've done well so far, Kakashi. But remember, you don't have to handle everything on your own. Kakashi's body language shifted slightly, his usual resistance kicking in. Sure, he muttered, though the word lacked conviction. Minato rose to his feet, clapping Kakashi lightly on the shoulder. Get some rest. It's been a long day. As Minato turned to head back inside, he paused at the door and glanced over his shoulder. Oh, and Kakashi? Kakashi looked up, a silent question in his gaze. Good job. For a fleeting second, Kakashi's stoic expression softened, a flicker of something more vulnerable breaking through. It was gone almost as soon as it appeared, but Minato caught it. Kakashi didn't say anything, but Minato didn't need him to. He knows. With one last glance at the stars, Kakashi settled back against the porch, and Minato finally went inside. The comforting sight of Kushina bustling around the kitchen greeted him, the scent of freshly brewed tea filling the air. He smiled. Home. I'm home. Welcome back, Kushina replied with a bright smile, gliding over to greet him with a chaste kiss. Her touch was brief but grounding. I imagine you have a long night ahead of you. I made you some tea, you know. Minato felt the tension in his shoulders ease at her words. There was something about Kushina that could make the most complicated of problems seem just a little more manageable. He followed her into the kitchen, the weight of the day beginning to lift ever so slightly. He pulled out a chair and sat down, watching her move around the room, setting down a plate with some water in front of him. Thanks, Minato said, lifting the cup to his lips. I have some reading to do. I just hope it's light, he added with a small sigh, pausing for a moment before his tone became more serious. What do you think of the girl? Kushina's face lit up. She is a gem. So full of life. I haven't seen anyone enjoy my ramen as much as her. She placed a hand on her hip, giving him a playful look. You could learn a thing or two from her. Kushina launched into her recount of the evening, gesturing animatedly as she described the girl's excitement over the food, her curiosity about everything in the house. Minato couldn't help but smile lovingly at her as she talked. Looks like the girl charmed my wife too. Kushina's enthusiasm was infectious, even when Minato's thoughts remained tangled with the complexities of the situation. He was grateful for the lightness she brought to their home, especially now. The kettle whistled, and Kushina went to finish his tea. Oh, and you might want to stock up on Pocky tomorrow. She's obsessed. Got real possessive over the last one. Duly noted. Minato chuckled softly, picturing the scene. Pocky, her weakness. Noted. It was strange how normal this moment felt, given everything else. But that was Kushina for you, making even the oddest situations feel like home. Once Kushina was satisfied Minato had everything he needed, she kissed him goodnight and headed off to bed. He watched her go, a sense of warmth spreading through him. Somehow, even in the midst of all this, she makes everything feel manageable. Alone in the quiet of the house, Minato moved to his study, the soft flicker of the lamp lighting the room just enough for him to begin his work. He settled into his chair, flipping open the reports, the cup of tea warming his hands. She had never seen anything like them. The moment she spotted the strange creatures moving through the trees, her curiosity flared to life. They were running, just like she sometimes did, and none of her family did, on two legs. They moved like her, yet they were wrong. Their bodies were covered in strange skins that weren't fur nor scales, not even like hers, and their faces, well, if you could call them faces, didn't move at all. They were smooth and shiny, reflecting the light like still water. No eyes, no mouths. How do they eat? How do they see? For a moment, she crouched low to the ground, watching them as they leaped from branch to branch with a kind of grace that reminded her of a bird's flight. But they weren't birds. They weren't anything she recognized. And that was exciting. She glanced at her companion, a sleek fox. He stared at her with his knowing eyes, a soft growl in his throat. Let them go. They're dangerous. But her curiosity tugged at her harder. Maybe they're like me. That thought sent a thrill through her. Mariki had always felt out of place, even in the forest she called home. Sure, she had her family, the wolves, birds, and foxes that raised her, but she had always been different. More different than the wolves were from the birds or the birds from the foxes. These creatures moved like she did, easily in two paws. She had always been curious. It was something her animal family often teased her about, her endless fascination with things that were different, things that didn't belong to the forest. They always told her curiosity would get her into trouble one day. You're going to follow the wrong rabbit hole one day. But how could she help it? And this time she had a reason. They feel familiar. When the fox nudged her with his nose one last time, she just gave him an apologetic hum. Her friend turned back toward the den. He was always cautious, much more so than her. No fun. He never wanted to explore. Always scared of something. So, she turned the other way and followed the creatures, moving silently through the trees. For hours she tracked them, her instincts telling her to be careful, to keep her distance. They were fast, really fast, and the way they communicated with each other confused her. They didn't chirp like the birds or growl like the wolves. How did they communicate? She crouched, watching them, studying the way they moved in perfect sync. The strange, unmoving faces made it hard to tell if they were even alive. Then, after what felt like forever, the creatures stopped in a small clearing. She perched on a branch above, her heart racing with both fear and excitement. One of the creatures disappeared into the trees above, vanished like smoke, and the others stayed below. Some leaned against trees, others lay down as if to sleep. Are they sleeping? It was hard to tell because their faces didn't change. Her instincts whispered danger. They don't belong here. This isn't safe. You should leave. But the same curiosity that had driven her this far urged her to stay. She waited a little longer, watching them carefully. The forest was quiet, the only sounds coming from the rustle of leaves in the breeze. After a few more minutes, she couldn't resist anymore. Just a closer look. Just to see. She crept down from her perch, her movements silent, like a shadow slipping through the underbrush. She made her way to the nearest creature, one of the ones who was lying on the ground, resting. Up close, it was even stranger. Its body was shaped like hers, but bigger, and those smooth faces, what are they? She crouched beside it, extending her hands slowly toward its shiny, featureless face. What are you? Her fingers brushed the surface, and she flinched. Cold. Hard. It. Snap! Something cold and firm gripped her wrist, and her heart shot into her throat. A strong grip wrapped around her wrist from the side. One of the creatures had appeared out of nowhere. It was the one that had disappeared into the trees earlier. He had her wrist, his grip firm but not painful. Her instincts roared to life. Danger! Run! With a burst of wild strength, she twisted, pulling her hand free from his grip. In her panic, her fingers caught on the edge of the strange creature's face, the cold, unmoving surface, and with a tug, the mask came off. She froze, staring at the mask in her hand, her mind spinning. What? Did I just deface it? For a split second, everything stopped. The clearing, which had been quiet moments before, seemed to hold its breath. She looked down at the mask, her eyes wide with shock. Did I hurt it? All of the other creatures were suddenly standing, their still, shiny faces locked on her. The creature she had ripped the face off of was pointing something black and shiny to her. Slowly, she raised her eyes, and saw something that shook her to her core. The creature had a face underneath. A real face. With eyes. With a mouth. Like hers. It wasn't smooth or still like the rest of them. It was alive. It blinked at her, wide-eyed, as if just as confused as she was. Two faces? Two faces? The creature that had taken her hand moved to grab her. Run! Her instincts screamed. Her body moved before her mind could catch up. She twisted away from the defaced creature and dashed toward the nearest group of trees. Gotta get out, gotta get away. Her heart pounded as she darted between the trees, her instincts on full alert. She darted left, then right, using the branches to push herself off and make sharp turns that even a fox would be jealous of. She took a low-hanging branch and used it to impulse a long jump. Run, run, run! She could hear them chasing her, the rustle of leaves and the faint sounds of their pursuit. They do bad turns. She anchored herself with a small branch just at the height of her hands and did almost a U-turn, her feet leaving the floor for a few seconds. She heard a grumble as one of them nearly fell when trying her turn. But something was off. As she weaved between trees, dodging their hands and movements, she realized they weren't trying to hurt her. They were fast, sure, but they weren't attacking like the wolves would when hunting. They were chasing, but not with the same kind of urgency. They're not predators. They're just trying to catch me? That realization gave her a strange sense of excitement, and she couldn't help the grin that spread across her face. She glanced over her shoulder, her eyes sparkling with mischief. This is fun! She darted toward a cluster of trees, but as she approached, something caught her eye, a low-hanging branch just above the head of one of the creatures. With a quick flick of her wrist, she grabbed the branch and swung herself over the creature's head. Her feet barely grazed the top of its shiny face, and for a split second, she saw herself reflected in the cold, hard surface. They can't stop me. She laughed, dropping down behind him. Leaping off another branch, she twisted her body in midair, narrowly dodging one of the creatures who reached out to grab her. Another one lunged at her from the side, but she planted her foot on a tree trunk and sprang off, causing him to slam his hands into the tree with a solid thud to avoid face butting it. Clumsy, but with reflexes to balance it. The others closed in quickly. She zigzagged through the clearing, making sharp turns that had the creatures tripping over themselves to keep up. She could feel them trying to catch her, their hands grasping at empty air as she darted around them like a rabbit evading foxes. She spotted a small rock on the ground and, without stopping, scooped it up. Let's see if they can dodge this. With a quick flick of her wrist, she tossed the rock through the air. It sailed with perfect precision, hitting one of the creatures square in the middle of its forehead. The creature froze, clearly stunned. Bullseye. A creature to its left got distracted and stumbled with a root that was slightly out of the earth. Her giggle echoed in the clearing. They're playing too. At least, that's what it felt like to her. But as she spun, she lost her footing and slipped, her leg catching the ankle of another one of the creatures. He tumbled forward, almost crashing into his comrade who had suddenly appeared behind her. Oops. Didn't mean that one. She quickly scrambled to her feet, still grinning, and darted away. She picked up speed, her legs carrying her faster. But even as she ran, she couldn't help the nagging thought in the back of her head. Do they all have two faces? Curiosity tugged at her again, hard. She had to know. So, naturally, she slowed down, wanting to test it. Without even slowing down, she veered toward another one of the creatures. This one was taller, its shiny face glinting in the moonlight. She dodged his hands as he reached for her, her small frame slipping out of his grasp like water. Too slow. In a quick, fluid motion, she jumped, balanced herself on its arms and tugged at his face. Another face. They all have two faces. She landed on the balls of her feet behind the creature. Her eyes went wide as the cold, hard face came off in her hand. Turning around, she saw another real, human-like face coming towards her. She stared in shock. Are they hiding their real faces under all this weird stuff? Why? In an instant, the atmosphere got heavier. Oh, no time to go. They don't like showing the other face. The creature whose cold face she had just removed made a quick grab for her, but she ducked under his arm, scurrying between his legs. The creature stumbled, clearly not expecting her to be so small or fast, and she heard it grunt in frustration behind her. They're hiding their face. No communication, no trust. Her excitement quickly drained away as the realization hit her. Out of nowhere, a creature appeared before her with a soft breeze. Not normal. The air around her grew tense, her instincts shifting from playful curiosity to something much heavier. Her pulse quickened, a sense of unease settling into her bones. This isn't fun anymore. She darted to her left, her movements more frantic now, driven by an urgent need to escape rather than play. Her once grinning face was now a mask of concentration as she wove through the trees, her small body darting between branches and leaping over rocks. I have to get away. Without warning, the ground beneath her erupted. An earth wall shot up in front of her, blocking her escape. She skidded to a stop, her hands scrambling at the dirt as she tried to climb it. No, no, no! She clawed at the wall, her fingers digging into the rough surface, but it was too high, too smooth. Panic gripped her as she spun around, only to see the creatures surrounding her. They weren't moving in to attack, but their presence felt overwhelming. One of them, the one whose face she had pulled off, took a step forward, his hands raised as if trying to calm her. I'm trapped. They're going to hurt me. I need to get away. She backed up against the wall, her small body trembling. She could feel the weight of their stares, the pressure of their presence. Her instincts screamed at her to flee, but there was nowhere to go. Her legs shook, exhaustion starting to settle in. Her heart pounded in her chest, her breaths coming in ragged gasps. I don't want to play anymore. Easy, one of them said, his voice muffled through the still mask. We're not going to hurt you. Its voice was soft, but the words meant nothing to her. She heard the gentleness on its sounds, but she could just see those weird, shiny, expressionless faces. Are you lying? How can I tell if your faces don't move? She turned her head left, then right, but they were everywhere. She couldn't escape. Her body trembled, her vision narrowing. The world seemed to close in on her, the earthen wall looming behind her, the creatures in front of her. One of them reached for her again, his face calm, but she couldn't trust it. No. You're lying. You're hiding. Her breath came in shallow gasps. I need to run. I need to get away. But she couldn't. Her body was failing her, her strength slipping away. The last thing she saw before everything went black was the face of the creature she had unmasked, staring down at her, still looking a bit surprised, his hand reaching out slowly. He wasn't trying to hurt her, but it didn't matter. Her mind was spinning, her instincts tangled between the urge to run and the weight of her fear. And then everything went black. Minato leaned back in his chair, fingers drumming softly against the surface of his desk as his eyes skimmed over the final few lines of the report. The moonlight filtered through the window, casting long shadows across the room, but his focus remained solely on the papers in front of him. 2 days. The girl had been in Konoha for 2 days, and somehow, he was just now hearing about it. And all because Kakashi had a random run-in with her. His eyes drifted to the section recounting her encounter with the Anbu team. Fast, incredibly agile, and, according to the report, unpredictable. The word lingered in his thoughts. Unpredictable. Exactly the word Kakashi had used earlier. I have to say it does describe her very well. Minato's brow furrowed slightly as he considered that. Fast and agile, yes, but against Anbu? 5 Anbu, highly trained, and she had played with them like it was nothing. The girl had led them on a chase through the trees, outmaneuvering them with an ease that would have impressed even seasoned shinobi. But she wasn't running out of fear. The report mentioned her laughing. Laughing. That's what unsettled him the most. her playfulness. She had giggled as she darted between the trees, almost like she was enjoying herself, as if the entire chase were a game. Minato rubbed his chin, letting the thoughts sink in. How could someone see evading Anbu as fun? But then they trapped her. Only when they used jutsu, an earth wall, did her fear take over. They had to use jutsu to capture a child. A mud wall! He let out a small chuckle, despite himself. Maybe she should be the one training them. The idea wasn't half bad, honestly. At least it would give the Anbu a workout. Sighing, Minato pushed the papers aside and stood, the soft creak of the chair breaking the silence in the room. He needed fresh air, something to help clear his thoughts. Moving toward the window, he leaned against the frame, eyes scanning the moonlit yard outside. The council is going to want answers, and they'll want to know what to do with her. And yet, letting them get involved now, when there was so much unknown about the girl, it felt like a mistake. They'd want to take control of the situation. Before they could make any decisions, Minato needed to understand her and her abilities better. Then his eyes landed on Kakashi, sitting under a tree with the girl nearby. He will definitely help, but I do not think he'll be enough. Maybe a tutor. Minato watched as Kakashi sat quietly, his usual stoic demeanor present, but there was something about his posture that caught Minato's attention. Kakashi was still watching the girl, who stood not far from him, her eyes lifted toward the sky. His gaze followed the girl as she moved toward the tree, her small hands reaching up to grasp the bark. He blinked as she began to climb. Her small hands and feet gripped the bark with precision, scaling the tree with efficiency. No wasted movement, no hesitation. So that's how she did it. The report didn't do her justice. This girl's agility was something beyond even what he had imagined. No wonder the Anbu struggled to catch her. Minato shifted, leaning further into the window as he continued to watch. The girl had climbed halfway up the tree, crouching on one of the larger branches as if she were scouting out the perfect spot to settle. He tilted his head slightly, bemused by her actions. It certainly looks like she lives in the forest. But alone? Impossible. And then the tree moved and his thoughts stopped its course. Mokutan? The thought struck him immediately when he saw the tree begin to shift. For a fleeting second, his heart raced. Could it be? But then he paused. No chakra flare, nothing. He watched closer, waiting for the familiar pulse of chakra that came with manipulating nature. But there was none. The tree shifted smoothly, as if responding to her will without the slightest effort. And the ease with which she did it was as if this was a natural ability for her. His hands gripped the windowsill a little tighter. This isn't Mokutan. It's something else. The way the tree curled, forming a cradle around the girl as she stood on it, was far too natural, almost protective. She's not forcing the tree, it's like it's following her lead. Minato pressed his hand against the window frame, his pulse quickening. This changes everything. He glanced toward Kakashi, whose wide-eyed shock mirrored his own. They both watched in silence as the girl settled down in her makeshift bed of leaves, perfectly at ease. How? His gaze flicked back to Kakashi, who was staring back up at the window, their eyes locking in a moment of mutual disbelief. Minato could see the question in Kakashi's eyes. Did that just happen? Minato blinked rapidly, nodding slowly in response. Yeah, Kakashi, I'm just as confused as you are. Kakashi gave him a helpless shrug from his perch on the branch. They stared at each other for a long, silent moment. Minato glanced back at the girl, who had already settled into her makeshift bed, her small form completely relaxed as if she hadn't just done something extraordinary. Minato slowly pulled back from the window, retreating into the shadows of his office. He leaned against the wall, his heart still racing. I need to get ahead of this. Fast. The council would probably argue every angle, from her being a potential threat to her being a potential asset. He'd have to tread carefully, find a way to make sure she was safe while navigating the political landmine that was the council. I need a plan. Minato pushed himself off the wall, pacing the room in quiet contemplation. Step 1. Figure out how to communicate with her, without it being a disaster. First things first, she needs to learn how to actually talk to people. It's great that she can communicate with wolves and make trees move, but unfortunately, either of those skills is going to help her navigate a conversation at the local market nor tell them about her life. Kakashi's gotten through to her a bit, but he's not exactly approachable for extended language lessons. Plus, if I leave it all to him, things might get weird. Kakashi learning purring as a second language? No thanks. She needs a proper tutor, someone patient but firm, who can guide her without treating her like an experiment. Maybe even someone who knows a bit about nonverbal communication. Inuzuka? They talk to dogs all the time, right? So, a retired Inuzuka who has experience in teaching. Perfect. Step 2. Understand her abilities, and hope I don't have to wrestle a tree. Clearly, she wasn't just some random child with height and agility. The girl can literally move trees. Trees. Not using any kind of visible chakra either. It's not Mokutan, not even close. She's more in sync with nature than anything I've ever seen. That alone puts her in a different category. The question is, what else can she do? Does she summon forests at will? Cause landslides if she's upset? Or maybe, she just has this one trick and the rest of her skills are more normal. Only one way to find out. I need to observe her more closely, maybe even test her limits a bit. But gently. I'd rather not end up on the wrong side of an oak tree. Kakashi said something of her wanting to play tag. If they play, he'll be able to see her abilities and decide better then. Surely I can keep up. Right. Step 3. Keep the council from losing their collective minds again. The council's going to have a field day with this. Some will want her contained for her own good, while others will see her as a potential village weapon. And then there's Danzo. I can practically hear him already. She belongs en route for the future of Konoha. I need a middle ground here, something that protects her without turning her into a tool for the village. She's too valuable to be left unsupervised, but that doesn't mean she should be treated like a prisoner. And if I'm going to keep Danzo's hands off her, I'll need to make sure she's under careful, trusted observation. Speaking of which. Step 4. She needs an Anbu escort, but not Kakashi. She'll need an Anbu escort. Kakashi's better off staying in the role of friend rather than becoming the guy who follows her around, monitoring her every move. He's attached already, and I don't want him playing both sides, monitoring her while also trying to bond with her. That's not fair to him or her. I need someone I can trust to protect her without making her feel trapped. Someone who doesn't report to Danzo. Someone who can handle the unpredictability without getting scared off if she starts growing trees out of nowhere. Maybe one of the quieter NBU agents, someone like Hawk. Yes. Hawk already has a soft spot for her, but he's not one to get emotional or reckless. If I'd put Hawk in charge of watching her, I know she'll be safe, and it'll keep the council happy too. Someone high-ranking. Minato paused mid-step, his instincts suddenly flaring. Something shifted in the air, a faint, almost imperceptible pulse. He turned toward the window, his breath catching again. She was doing it. Again. But this time, it wasn't for her. Minato watched as she crafted a cradle of sort. And there, seated in the center, was Kakashi. The tree had shaped itself around him, forming a bed of leaves and branches, as though it was tucking him in for the night. Minato inhaled slowly, opening his senses. There it was, a faint pulse of nature energy. His eyes widened slightly as the realization hit him. She wasn't just moving trees, she was channeling nature energy, similar to Jiraiya's Sage mode. Okay, so. Step 5. Research Sage abilities, and write to Jiraiya. If she's tapping into nature energy, Jiraiya would know more about this. I'll send word to him, see if he can come back to the village for a bit. Maybe he's encountered something like this before. And while we're at it, I'll need to look into everything we have on Senjutsu, Sage abilities, and Mokutan, anything that might explain what she's doing. Step 6. Figure out who's meddling behind my back, and stop them. The fact that the girl had been in the village for 2 days and he'd only found out because of Kakashi? That didn't sit right. And it wasn't just a matter of the council dragging their feet. Something, or someone, was meddling. Danzo's the obvious suspect, but is it only him? The question gnawed at him. Sure, Danzo had a long history of keeping secrets, but he knew Danzo respected him as the Hokage and wouldn't just undermine him like this. Right. I need eyes on this quietly. Minato's brow furrowed. He would need to approach this delicately. Minato rubbed the bridge of his nose, feeling the weight of it all settle in. Tomorrow,